So, after a long time, we are now on Season 4. We're given 26 episodes once again, unlike Season 3, which gave us 13. How well will Season 4 hold up? How much can it establish? Well, it's time to get back to my routine in talking about every episode. And that's a big one. And so far, this episode has a lot to go over.
An Equestrian History episode!
Oh, hi Ink. How did you get here?
Oh, hi Golden. Haven't collabed with you yet. See, I've been practicing controlling the rift. Voice of Reason is now my master, and I am his apprentice. We rule the rift together.
Okay. Since you're a fan of history, that makes sense.
Heck yeah, am I a fan of equestrian history? Anyone who knows anything about me knows that. Let the review begin!
Twilight, now as a princess, is set to play a role in the Summer Sun celebration in Canterlot with Celestia and Luna. Unfortunately, because of her role, she has to stay in Canterlot as her friends are heading back to Ponyville, which leaves her behind and left alone. However, Celestia is willing to comfort Twilight as she attempts to pay a visit in her room, while Twilight goes over a checklist of her preparations. Here we see Celestia's viewpoint of the Summer Sun celebration, as her vision on it is deep and somber towards Luna.
I must admit that it is wonderful to actually be looking forward to the Summer Sun celebration.
What do you mean?
For my subjects, it has always been a celebration of my defeat of Nightmare Moon. But for me, it was just a terrible reminder that I'd had to banish my own sister.
I guess I'd never really thought about it that way.
With the current events, she hopes to change her viewpoints for the better.
Good lord, I loved this part. Here we really get to see Celestia's regret of sending her sister away. She really does care for her sister, and I found that so heartwarming. Now can you fans please stop calling Celestia a tyrant and a troll? Anyway, I love how Celestia and Twilight's relationship is portrayed here. I have always loved the idea of how Celestia is like a mother to Twilight, and when the two shared that little cuddle, my heart exploded. This, my friends, is the definition of adorable. I really hope we get to see more of this mother-daughter sort of relationship later in the season.
Then, surprise surprise, Celestia and Luna get captured, which leaves the conditions of Equestria in an unusual state. Both the sun and the moon are mixed together, splitting both day and night in half. It's later found out that the Everfree Forest is out of control and expanded into Ponyville, and this is overall threatening Equestria. Plants of black vines and spiky clouds are popping out, causing environmental havocs. Twilight, now in charge, heads down to Ponyville to meet up with her friends and investigate behind this turmoil. They luckily run into Sakura, who has moved away from the forest due to the obvious conditions, and conveniently, Sakura has a potion that explains the details behind the historical events.
You mean the Deus Ex Potiona?
It only works behind Alicorn magic, which obviously leaves Twilight to test it out. In effect, she's taken through a flashback that eventually leads her to where the elements of harmony originate from, the Tree of Harmony. Based on what we've seen, Twilight figures out that the Tree of Harmony is in possible jeopardy and is in need of help, and ever so conveniently is it located in the Everfree Forest, and thus they venture off. I'll just say right here and now, I really admire this premiere. What I get here is a lot of what I asked for. We get screen time with Celestia and Luna for once. We're given historical events behind them, from Luna's transformation to Discord's reign, and they're all played out so well. In fact, the part that gets me the most is during Celestia's battle with Nightmare Moon. Every moment is intense, the action is exhilarating, and the overall conflict is largely tragic and somber.
This freaking part. I have no words. The animation was absolutely glorious. The emotion was beautiful, and the overall epicness was astounding. This is my favorite part of the premiere, maybe of the whole series. I have been wanting equestrian history for a long time, and now my dream has come true. As an artist, I can really appreciate all the hard work that went into this. You really have to wonder how many programs they're using besides Flash at this point. The elements of harmony were obviously CGI, but you have to wonder what other parts of the scene used other programs.
At one point during their fight, Celestia is taken down and Twilight's emotionally stunned by her defeat.
No. Why would Luna do this? Why now?
This part almost made me cry. Celestia's scream, Twilight's weeping, and the beautiful lighting and art direction make this a very emotional scene. I applaud you, DHX.
While it is true that Twilight is still oblivious to knowing that everything is played out as a memory, it's still a well-played scenario. Admittedly though, it's a pointless filler to the main story, but it helps me appreciate Celestia more than ever. Based on what Celestia was explaining regarding Luna and the Summer Sun celebration, this flashback thoroughly emphasizes her loss to Luna when she had to banish her. We even see her in tears in the process of doing this, giving us how tragic it was for her. There's already fan work about this in the past to be sure, but the show never revealed the emotional side of the story until now, and for once I'm glad to finally see that we have more activity with Celestia and Luna. In fact, in the Season 4 opening that's altered, Luna appears next to Celestia, which can simply imply that she might get more screen time this season.
Perhaps the only flaw I have with this part was Nightmare Moon's dialogue. It was pretty darn cheesy. Same with her stupid, evil laughter. Also, wasn't Nightmare Moon's voice supposed to be deeper? The voice used here is Luna's. Besides that, this part was absolutely perfect.
The other aspect that holds strong to me is Twilight's role as a princess. Many viewers were worried about the possibilities of making Twilight a Mary Sue. Surprisingly, she's still herself and she is unsure about her place as being a princess. Going even further, with Celestia and Luna absent, Twilight's the only one the guards and authorities can look up to, and it's a pretty pressuring situation that weighs over her shoulders. But instead of panicking, she boldly takes steps and gives orders to the guards and insists on figuring out the situation.
The royal guards seem to be getting lamer every season. Their job was to protect the princesses, and they failed. You had one job, guys. One job.
Based on the term princess, it was addressed as a marketing stereotype which was often misrepresented to young girls, ignoring the true values of what a real princess is. This episode has proven that term in the acts of responsibility and not just being a princess for the sake of respect.
It's every pony's dream to someday wear a crown and have their coronation ceremony preserved in stained glass for all to see.
I don't know if it's every pony's dream.
That couldn't be any more truthful in society today. In furthering this topic, during Twilight's journey to the tree, her friends try to convince her that she should depart away and leave the task to them. It's a heart-wrenching scene given how divided she feels, but considering that Twilight's the remaining princess Equestria can look up to, they don't want to risk endangering her.
Heart-wrenching? Maybe. Not for me, though. For me, this was my least favorite part. After all the girls have been through together, they're treating Twilight differently after she just got some wings. They don't even realize that she's the same pony, even after in the beginning scene she told them to treat her the same. It would have been okay if one or two of the main six had agreed to her leaving being for the best, but all of them? Even Rainbow Dash, the element of loyalty? Perhaps Twilight could have decided to stay with the girls, and later they would have learned that just because a friend has a change in status or appearance, it doesn't mean they're a different person, pony. Or maybe Twilight could have learned that as a leader, she must lead by example and do anything to help her kingdom. Or maybe the girls would learn to trust her friends. I don't know, this scene kind of bugged me.
Well, on some technicality, Dash was loyal by keeping Twilight away for safety reasons. It isn't always about literally sticking by their sides, but taking greater risks to keep others safe. Meanwhile, we also get someone who we haven't seen in a while, Discord. In terms of morality and humor, Discord stole the show. Despite that he's been reformed, he's still zany, cynical, and still a dickhead. As usual, the many gags he conjures up are very creative, even to the point where he appears wearing a maid dress. And I still get laughs out of it. What I value more of, though, is that by his manipulative antics, he teaches Twilight a few lessons by still being a dick. Upon Twilight's return, Discord convinces her to go back to her friends, which in short does a huge favor for her. Additionally, though spoiling the ending, Discord reveals that he was the one responsible for growing the black vines back 1,000 years ago, but in an original attempt to stop the tree before being turned to stone. Even though he's reformed, he utilizes his antics to get the main six to learn something. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's an authentic way for me to appreciate what Discord does. And as usual, John Delancey still has a lot of fun with his role.
Before this episode, Discord was an okay villain to me. He was fun and great, but Chrysalis was my favorite. After seeing this episode, though, Discord skyrocketed into the place of my favorite villain. He was amazing in this episode. The visual gags were great, his dialogue was great, and his personality was stupendous. I had always been wondering why people liked Discord so much, and now I really can see why. Also, this part was hilarious.
Oh, this is so much fun. How about a game of pin the tail on the pony?
Admittedly though, I'm giving this premiere a lot more credit than I should, but I can't go as far as to say that I love it either, because there's a lot of shortcomings that stick out like a sore thumb. Some questions are being answered by this premiere based on the previous events of the series, and yet more questions are raised to the point where nearly plot holes are potentially being penetrated in this one. Where did this potion come from, for example? Is it going to be explained later in the series? Since the main six had to return the elements of harmony to the tree, I want to know where the tree came from as well. I at least hope that this is explained later on, because we don't need any more MacGuffins or Deus Ex Machinas. Now granted, not all questions can be answered, but when you explore the origins of something to another that raises questions on where that's from, you're going to get an ongoing chain of events that'll be very confusing in the grand scheme of things.
To be honest, I'm sad that the elements had to go. They were an important part of the show, and it's a bit heartbreaking to realize they may never be seen again. After all, like Applejack said, they were what brought the ponies together. Without them, there would most likely be no main six.
By the end, we're given a key box which indicates that the rest of the season will possibly be more adventure-based than the previous seasons, and each of them will individually have their own personal spotlight. And again, based on what we've seen in the opening with Luna appearing next to Celestia, we might get more activity with the Alicorn sisters.
The Royal Sisters are some of my absolute favorite characters in the show. I really love all the attention they're getting, and I hope we get to see more of that throughout the season. Especially a Celestia episode. Please, dear God, let there be a Celestia episode.
Ultimately, as it falls flat on several keys after what I pointed out earlier, I thoroughly enjoyed this premiere. We're given historical insight of what we've known, and we see it through our own eyes as it touches upon what solutions need to be solved on our own terms, given that the main six had to give up the elements. On top of that, it's a visually stunning looking episode. The animation is smooth and fluent, and some scenes have some well-rendered shading effects, providing more dimension than the three previous seasons. This blows the Crystal Empire completely out of the water, and we're given a very strong start. Say what you want about how Sombra was supposed to be the sense of darkness, but it fails miserably, given that he's physically present when Sauron, who Megan drew inspiration from, was spiritually returning. It's from this point on that, based on what villains I've seen recently, I don't think Megan McCarthy can write villains very well, and I'm glad to see that she didn't write one at this point. There was a conflict itself that needed to be resolved over 1,000 years ago.
I loved this episode. It was a beautiful start to a hopefully amazing season.
So what's in store for us this season? What direction will the series bring the main six to? Until we get these answers, I'm GoldenFox, and I will catch you all later.
And I am Inkrose, who is hoping desperately for a Celestia episode. See you all later. Into the Rift I go!
Well, that's an odd way to leave the rift. Come to think of it, that's pretty creative. Gotta admire that stuff. Whoa, what was that flash? Holy crap, a cutie mark! Castlevania reference? Check. Now let's get on with the review. As Season 4 was under the works, 4 new writers were brought forth this time. Since I've been used to the many names I've heard prior, this kind of left me feeling a bit skeptical at first, because I'm not exactly sure on what their styles are and what could be brought to the table. It takes me a little while to indicate their qualities, and even then it gets a little challenging for me. Corey Powell, for example, has left me split by 2 of her episodes. She wrote Sleepless in Ponyville, which was an episode I thoroughly loved in Season 3, and yet she wrote Just for Sidekicks, an episode I hated during Season 3. However, even the more notorious writers out there can have their fair share of good episodes, including Meriwether Williams. So with all that in mind, we start off with Josh Haber, who is the writer for this episode, Castle-Maina. He's pretty new according to his resume on IMDb, and so far, this episode was fairly decent. It begins when Twilight's given a letter from Celestia to explore the library of the abandoned castle in the Everfree Forest. This is mainly because she wanted to know more information behind the key box from the Tree of Harmony. Sadly though, this was never mentioned again, and the episode doesn't serve much of a purpose for the key box afterwards, and instead becomes a setup to lure Twilight in the castle. Coincidentally, we're given pairings of the rest of the main 6. Starting off with is Rarity and Fluttershy. They enter the castle to retrieve some ancient tapestries so that they can modify them. On the other hand, both Applejack and Rainbow Dash pair up on their way to the castle to compete for who is the most daring pony. Eventually, they all get separated and snagged by the many haunted house cliches imaginable. Trapdoors, hidden passages, living portraits, aggressive thunder and lightning, and heavy organ music played in the background. On top of that, there's an ancient myth that Applejack explains.
When Nightmare Moon was banished, not every last bit of her dark magic went with her. Granny used to say, when night falls on the castle, that magic takes the form of the Pony of Shadows!
We later see this appear at the end of the episode with glowing eyes. Either it's a villain being set up for a finale, or it's just a wink to the audience. I'll have to wait for that one. The one thing I should get out of the way are the gripes and nitpicks that I have, which are very noticeable. For starters, Rarity only cares about collecting the tapestries in the castle, and that's pretty much it. At one point, Fluttershy loses Angel, and not once does Rarity give a crap about her concerns. Yet for that matter, why the hell did Fluttershy bring Angel with in the first place? She knows how dangerous the castle could be. What also bothers me is that Rarity has Fluttershy insist on taking down a giant heavy tapestry by herself, when obviously Rarity could just lift it off the wall with her telekinetic magic. Later on, she does try to lift another tapestry with her magic, except she's pulling it from the fabric and not from the pole. What's also annoying is that Twilight's completely unaware of the pipe organ that's playing in the background as she's reading that Alicorn Sisters journal. I know it's kind of nitpicking, but in short, these motivations are pretty weak and forced. So yeah, I wasn't fond of Rarity and Fluttershy pairing up. Applejack and Rainbow Dash, on the other hand, were entertaining by their competitive nature. Even in that regard, however, the competition can get pretty ridiculous. In the beginning of the episode, we see them covered up in bees, which was weird as hell. As they were further separated in the castle, they were assuming each to themselves that they were winning the competition despite what they were dealing with. That all said, however, it thankfully doesn't overwhelm or distract me. The idea behind the episode is to play with the haunted house cliches in such a comedic way, and clearly it shows. The interactions with one another are pretty engaging on the level of what leaves you guessing what will happen to them. They connect with one set piece to the next, although strangely they don't hear each other's screams for some reason. While I'm on the subject of screams, some viewers found them to be annoying, but to be completely honest, I found these screams to be hilarious, especially with the involvement of Applejack and Rainbow Dash's daring game and the level of pride that makes them deny their fear. A lot of what they are scared of is nothing really to be scared about. It's just the fear psychologically getting the best out of them. And ultimately, the absolute best part of the episode is at the climax, where they're all backing up into each other in the center of the castle, and flipping out like crazy. Dash and Applejack are running all over the place like pinballs, Rarity's covered in one of the tapestries, and admittedly watching her cry into the fabric is just adorable as hell. And lastly... Holy crap, did Angel just get crushed by a pillar Applejack knocked over?
I'm pretty sure GoldenFox is actually laughing at this scene right about now.
Ha ha ha, I'm so loving this scene. I mean really, he was such a dick. He was abusive, he was unsupportive, and overall just unforgivably despicable to no end. That little fucker deserved to be crushed and put out of his misery.
Dude!
Ah, what the hell? Jim?
Fox, you are fucking sick. That is the most sadistic thing I've ever heard out of you. Have you lost your goddamn mind?
I was kidding.
What, seriously?
Yes, Angel isn't really dead. He was found by Twilight earlier in the episode when he was nourished a batch of carrots. What Fluttershy saw was a silhouette of what she thought was Angel, but it was just a pair of leaves that fell out of Rarity's mane and landed on a rock, thus resembling the shape.
Oh, okay then. I really can't blame you for hating Angel, though. Little fucker deserves to be crushed by a pillar.
Anyway, Twilight calms them down and they all discover that Pinkie was the one playing the organ. Earlier in the episode, she said she was heading to school to ring the bell. This wasn't what I had in mind, but hey, it's Pinkie. You can't question it. They gather together and start a new moral system of the series by writing down their very own journal for their lessons and experiences to be passed on to the next generation. Seems convenient enough since Twilight's no longer Celestia's student. See, that's how you change the moral values.
I didn't learn anything. I was right all along.
Sorry, I still just irk at that scene. On a whole, this episode was a lot of fun. The characters could have been presented better, but it wasn't too bothersome to me. Some of the scenes were pretty suspenseful and pretty well comedically timed. The various contraptions in the castle were also pretty creative, despite how cliché they were. And on top of that, the intense atmosphere was great, and the shadowing of the dark colors and the music all fit together, creating that level of suspense. Not bad, Josh. Not bad. I hope to see more from you. Until next time, this is GoldenFox, and I will catch you all later. Oh yes, an episode about the writer of Daring Do. This is going to be very interesting. I mean, I couldn't possibly say how this could go wrong.
AKA
I spoke too soon, didn't I? When I first heard about the episode Daring Do, I was immediately intrigued at the concept, which was Dash's opportunity to get to know the author. I personally found that to be a nice concept, since surely a lot of fans of a book series would want to do anything to get to know the author a bit more and explore their passion and what they like and appreciate their inspirations. However, as the episode aired, my expectations were dramatically different, as well as many others just after the episode. As a matter of fact, this alone got a huge split reception, and that isn't too much of a surprise when you see the works of Dave Polsky's previous episodes Feeling Pinkie Keen and Keep Calm and Flutter On. You just never get a break, do you, Polsky? As the episode begins, Dash is extremely excited about the next Daring Do book coming out. That isn't until Twilight addresses to her that the book has been postponed by a few more months. Wanted to know why, she and the rest of the main six venture off to find the author, A.K. Yearling. They find their home, which is completely trashed, so they investigate to figure out what happened, and then she arrives.
A.K. Yearling? We didn't do this! We swear!
What have you done to my house?
Eventually, some thugs break into her home, and thus, within a fight, A.K. Yearling is revealed to be the actual Daring Do.
A.K. Yearling is Daring Do! A.K. Yearling and Daring Do are one and the same. My mind is officially blown!
Yes, all the stories that Twilight and Dash have been reading were secretly true stories. That's quite a lot to take in. Daring Do is a real adventurer. Ahilzoro is a real villain, and the overall scheme that he plans to do is stack up all the giant rings in an Aztec temple and bring 800 years of heat. This alone is what drove the episode into the division of the fandom, and it's pretty easy to see why that is. The fact that you have an author who's also the character in the stories that she wrote is random and arbitrary, and also unsustainable to any suspension of disbelief. Questions are raised by comparing the events to the mythology of Equestria. I'm not necessarily as bothered behind it as some viewers are, but it is a concern. I can very much understand that as it is, especially since many questions and supposed plot holes were brought about. Also, before you mention this to me, yes, I saw Mr. Enter's take on the matter, and for the most part, he has some very good points, and in some cases I found this to be a nice twist, and opened itself up to being a full adventure episode that also tackled on the internal conflict with Dash and her obsessive nature. Getting back to the story, Dash tries to help out Yearling, or Daring Do at this point, but only gets her into trouble, which leaves Dash irresponsible for her actions. One of the biggest and most important highlights is Dash's obsessiveness getting the best out of her. Throughout the rest of the episode, Dash is conflicted with herself and wanted to participate in Daring's journey. Apparently this becomes an issue with her, and it's nice to see a different conflict take on this character instead of tackling on her pride all the time. Some people believe that Dash was out of character because of her fangirling over the stunning realization that Yearling is Daring Do, but for the most part, I've seen her act like this before with Spitfire and how she reacted to the second book she was going to read on Read It and Weep. At this point, I find Dash to be a little more wide open than what I originally saw her as in the past. However, the thing that bothers me is during the beginning of the episode. While Daring was looking for one of the rings, Dash rudely got on her shoulders and wanted her to finish the book. I get that it's supposed to be rude and insensitive to show that Dash's fangirlism is getting the best out of her, but it feels dismissive to me and wanted to root for her. Thankfully, it's only a small part of the episode as it eventually gets left and forgotten. Another highlight that utterly fascinated me was that it contained the mirrors of bronies. Remember in Read It and Weep that it was the parallel of becoming a brony? Well, the same social commentary applies here. At one scene, Dash and Twilight have a heated debate over the many books they've read, overlaying whether or not they should help out Daring's turmoil. This is what many analysts and reviewers like myself do from time to time. Occasionally. Okay, frequently. Similarly, Dash is excited about the next book, and it's like us being excited for the next season. Not to mention the amount of delays that have overwhelmed us when waiting for seasons 3 and 4. On top of that, watching Dash interact with Daring kind of reminds me of us interacting with the staff members at various conventions. I'm not sure if Dave intended to write it out this way or not, but if he did, I have to give him major respect for it. Additionally, I was stunned by the many action scenes throughout the whole episode. Even though at times it was comedically executed, it definitely supported the paying home watch to Indiana Jones. As I may recall, even the fight scenes in those movies were comedically timed, and I was fine with that. Those movies weren't always meant to be taken too seriously. That's another thing to take into high consideration of. The entire homage to Indiana Jones. It's a nice nod from the map viewpoint to the Aztec architecture to the double crosser like Caballerian was. Very much like Renee Belloc was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Needless to say, I overreacted when I first saw the episode, but when watching it again, I was able to take a lot from it. Digging down to the bottom of the barrel, yeah, I liked it. I thought it was an okay episode. I am aware of how concerning the premise is, but that's as much of an issue I have with it. It alone could be the biggest complaint of the episode for sure, and I do understand so, but it doesn't bother me personally. I could say that just making the Arthur just an Arthur instead of having her as the disguise of Daring Do would have been a better choice, but it wouldn't make that much of a difference to me since both Dash and the Arthur could have had that sense of adventure either way, even though you do have to alter the dynamics. Despite being controversial though, I had to give Dave more respect here. So yeah, Mr. Enter, I'm siding with you. I too enjoyed this episode. So until the next episode, I'm GoldenFox, and I'll catch you all later. So we're given another episode that centers on Scootaloo. Since Sleepless in Ponyville was an excellent episode of Season 3 for me, it is no surprise at all when I say that my hopes were over the roof on this one. Only this time, it's an episode about our potential character development. Upon watching it, I immediately loved it. It's kind of no surprise though, since this episode has received a lot of positive reviews. In addition, we're introduced to another new writer, Ed Valentine. Since I already pointed out that new writers can be iffy for me, I think Megan has made the right choices of what these writers can provide so far. Theoretically though, since we haven't seen all the new writers showing off their episodes. But so far, Ed has provided a lot with this one. We start off with Miss Harshwinning entering the Ponyville classroom about the Equestrian Games. She announces that a competition is being held for whoever wins gets to carry the flag for Ponyville. In addition, Dash is the coach for the competition since she won the games when she was very young. And considering that Scootaloo has a strong passion for Dash, she and her friends of course participate. In doing so, they successfully prepare and perform their act, impressing her. Unfortunately, while Dash is thoroughly impressed, she's conflicted in trying to control her excitement since she's been lectured by Harshwinning on the level of professionalism, and she has to offer it very well as it depends on Dash's job for the matter. Because of this, she states her view in such an underwhelming tone that it lets down the CMC's confidence a notch. And as if that couldn't get any worse, Diamond Tiara intervenes and torments Scootaloo's flying ability, stating how improperly it represents Pegasine Ponyville.
You're showing all 3 types of Ponyville ponies, yet you have a Pegasus pony who can't even fly! Well, have fun practicing anyway. Even if your routine will never, how shall I say, take off.
She torments a disabled child.
Diamond Tiara is a fucking bitch. Like, oh my god, this girl is evil.
I'm going to save that for later. So because Scootaloo has taken this to heart, she struggles trying to fly, which becomes an overwhelming and unsuccessful issue than the actual performance itself. Much like Sleepless in Ponyville, this episode takes Scootaloo's issue and presents it on such an emotional scale. Her struggling towards flying is pretty sympathetic since we know she couldn't fly to begin with and is getting very desperate. The way her handicap was tackled on was played out differently than what I originally expected. Instead of making it a direct focus, it plays a role in what she feels is important, needed, or was just overwhelming to her. Of course, her flying abilities isn't as important for the act as Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle pointed out, but given that she's never been able to fly throughout her life, it makes sense when it comes to how insecure she feels. At this point, she gives up, no longer wanting to participate for the competition. Even though her friends try to help her, she still feels negative and fears it would cost them their performance. Another topic on this episode to address is Rainbow Dash. In this subplot, while it feels inconvenient towards Scootaloo, it fits an interesting obstacle for Dash and provides more convenience for Harshwinning and her purpose in the series. And that speaks a lot after games Ponies play. In fact, Harshwinning's excitement over the CMC's performance at the end of the episode pays off pretty well in this subplot, knowing that you don't always have to be professional, just be yourself. And as remained, Dash is still supportive even in doubt when she gets excited all the time. Nearing to the end, when she finds out that Scootaloo was forfeited and even throwing her scooter away, she immediately runs to talk to her. And what explains here is fulfilling to inform what's most important about her.
Flying's what Pegasus ponies are supposed to do. You flew when you carried the flag in the games. But that was me.
You're you. And it just doesn't matter if you can fly or not. Your routine was amazing because it represented exactly what makes Ponyville special.
I should also add that we get our first musical number in the entire season, Hearts as Strong as Horses. To get this off my chest, I love this song. I love how well it's presented and written out and how visually stunning the musical is played out. Even though it doesn't establish much of a purpose other than to be a training montage, the composition is simple, motivating, and so optimistic that it gets me engaged with what the rest of the episode offers. In fact, it's reprised near the end of the episode when Scootaloo is reunited with her friends, and it has such a big payoff when she rides her way back to the Crystal Empire, and even bro-hoofing Granny Smith. So with all this in mind, you would think I would have nothing to complain about, right? Unfortunately, no. As much as I can appreciate what this episode offers, some issues are overwhelming, it's that critical. Starting off with, Diamond Tiara is the one morally irresponsible for getting Scootaloo in this condition in the first place. The many schemes that she's pulled off in other episodes were rightfully punished. However, what she did here was so unnerving and downright cold-hearted that it's pretty much the worst thing that she has ever done in the series. And she gets away with it. No one scolds her, no one punishes her, not a single bit of karma is properly backfired to her. She's left completely forgotten as she has no remorse whatsoever. And that's a big deal because it's utterly crucial when you go as far as to torment someone who is handicapped. Say what you want about Babseeds and how much a lot of you wanted her punished for tormenting the CMC in one bad apple, but in comparison, she had her reasons and was more dimensional than what Diamond was, so she's a lot more forgivable to me. This episode has no justification on Diamond's actions at this point, and ever since then, she has become my most hated character in the show, period. Yes, I hate her even more than Snips and Snails, Mayor, Flim and Flam, and even Angel Bunny. It's that low. I was hoping that she could have been written out for something better in the series, which is why I used to appreciate her since Ponyville Confidential. But now, she's just a contrived plot convenience, nothing more. Speaking of other characters I utterly detest, there's another issue that bothers me.
Hey! It could happen!
Based on what these morons have said, I get the irking feeling that if an episode about the Equestrian Games were to happen, chances are in all likelihood they would be the cliche underdog winners that the characters underestimate. If that were the case, you're simply rewarding more negative behavior since these two dorks let the Ursa Minor in Ponyville and wreck the town. I seriously hope that these characters are left out. They aren't needed, they aren't wanted, they failed to be the comic relief, forget about them. And lastly, the ending. Just when you think that Scootaloo is going to get her cutie mark.
You know what this means, right? What? We are totally gonna get cutie marks in flag carrying.
God damn it, DHX, why do you have to tease us like that? We've got a good number of seasons going by, and we get to see the CMC slowly but surely maturing at every step of the way. And then you have to go and pull a 180 on their character development at the very last minute here? What an utter cock tease. At the very least, this could have been completely subtracted and add more potential with what you're doing with her. Hell, you could have completely taken that out and thrown that karma at Diamond Tiara. We know what their talent is. They should know what their talent is. It's in their name. I know they're kids, but stop making them this oblivious. With that all said and done though, I was pretty satisfied with what the episode meant to tackle on. By the end, I almost forgot about these issues, though occasionally they pop out to me. I don't think it's the best episode that people made it out to be, but I can understand its appeal. I mean, I love this episode, but man, there could have been so many things justified. Since this is Ed Valentine's first episode to write, I'm willing to let him off. I still wish Diamond Tiara was punished for her actions, getting away with everything and all. Okay, so we have a superhero-themed episode, just like we expected from the animatics. So how well does this one hold up? Are you fucking kidding me right now? An episode revolving around superheroic elements to make a completely different and dynamic episode that stands out among the series is what I was expecting Mysterious Mare-Duel to be, and that wasn't the case until Season 4. However, even with that, this episode has received a lot of hatred from the analysts and reviewers ever since this episode aired. Several complaints and reactions were over the top, implying it was garbage. The fussing never stops. Honestly, I don't think it was that bad. It could have been a lot worse. It surely didn't have a hypocritical message, an unintentional subject matter that rose controversy, nearly killing off our main protagonist, or even backhanding the show's moral values by having a character simply imply they didn't learn jack shit while having mean-spirited humor. Compared to all those episodes, this one was harmless. The episode begins when the main six are restoring the ruins of the Royal Sisters Castle in the Everfree Forest. Spike insists on helping out but isn't given any tasks. Meanwhile, he reads a comic book entitled The Power Ponies, and along the way he rants on about a character named Humdrum, who he hates only because he finds him not only useless, but also there for just comedy relief. Eventually, Spike reaches the final page, which turned out to be a blank sheet, only with small text printed on the corner. After reading it, he and the main six get sucked in and thus entering the universe of the comic. The main six are all the power ponies that Spike remembers. Twilight is the masked Matterhorn, who is supposedly known for having a wide variety of horn powers. Pinkie Pie is Filli Second, who is more of the fast runner like Flash. Rainbow Dash is Zap, whose powers were reminiscent of Storm from X-Men by controlling the weather. Rarity is Radiance, who is able to conjure up any fancy inanimate objects. Applejack is Mistress Marvelous, who's a hybrid of Batman and Wonder Woman. Lastly, Fluttershy is Saddle Ranger, who's obviously revealed at the end to be the Incredible Hulk. That is saved for the last act of the episode. The only way to get back to Equestria is to defeat the villain of the comic entitled the Maniac. Yeah, that's admittedly a stupid name. Going over her first, her powers are mostly a resemblance of Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man, but only replace the metal tentacles with overgrown hair, and several hair puns that she spews out. Her minions are fashionists, barbers, or clones of Antony C, and her headquarters is a shampoo factory where she's mutated from. Her plan is to steal an artifact that activates a giant cannon, which is literally a hairdryer. Once activated, she's more than capable of taking over the world.
Of course!
God damn it, I walked right into that one. Add to this, she possesses the hairspray of doom, which is used to stun anyone caught in its path. This villain is as every bit as cliche as you can imagine, but I already expected that because generally speaking, most comic book villains I've seen throughout my life have been practically portrayed this way forever. It's that tradition of power-hungry dictators in which, while utterly cliche, it has never gotten old over time. Some people found this to be a completely bland direction, but personally, I don't know what would have worked better. I mean, it's a comedic homage to comic books, so I didn't find this to be an issue. While I'm approaching on the subject matter of its concept, I enjoyed the art, the direction, and the style. It completely deviates from the show, and it definitely displays that even for a show for girls, it has an authentic look standing out from the target audience. And boy is it embraced. It's zany, over the top, it doesn't expect you to take it too seriously. Unfortunately, with the episode's running time, there is little to no room with the whole environment to explore upon. In fact, one major letdown is that the main six superpowers are underwhelming. Dash, for example, is already able to control the weather, and that's nothing new with what powers she's capable of. What's even worse, she only conjures up tornadoes and that's it. Similarly, Twilight only uses ice shots throughout the whole episode and that's it. We're never given any other sources of what Twilight can use, regardless of what she was told. I'm also confused as to why Pinkie's filled in the role of Flash when that kind of power is closely related to Dash in the first place. Then again, matching the parts would have also been an issue. In fact, as far as I'm concerned about the other abilities that match the other characters, there isn't anything new or special about them. And whenever there is something different, it's not explored well enough. Also, surprise surprise, Spike is Humdrum, the character he utterly detests. Of course, this is the conflict of self-doubt. This kind of message has not only been tackled on before, but is also hammered in this one. Where I stand differently, however, is that this plays a metaphorical role of what he had negative feelings on. Based on his rants on the character, seeing he become him shows that you'll have to make the best out of what you become. I mean, being sucked into Thundercats only to be Snarf has to suck really bad. Or for that matter, you become Starscream in Transformers or Jigglypuff in the Smash Bros. Universe. This is what got me engaged in Spike's role to begin with. So while the message is hammered in, I personally wasn't bothered behind it. It was mostly him making his way through the comic book universe, which ultimately takes the majority of this episode's plot. Another majority of this episode is the comedic action that's taken place. One of the biggest moments I remember is Pinkie Pie's antics where she plays tag with the henchmen. Other times the characters are just adjusting to themselves with the superheroic power counterparts and that's it. Although at times it kind of fails in the process. Of course though, the one major moment that was built up to was Fluttershy's Hulk rage.
Like you're just a great big meanie!
There! I said it! What makes you think you're so special? Like the rules of common courtesy don't apply to you? Why don't you pick on somebody your own size?
Viewers found this to be a problem because once again it's mentioned that it's nothing new. While that is true, I personally found Fluttershy's rage to be one of the best moments in the entire episode. Of course, Spike succeeds and proves himself useful, the villain is defeated, and they're all taken out of the comic book. Going over this bit, Spike elaborates that he purchased the comic book from an enchanted store in Canterlot, which indicated that the comic alone was magic. Even if I was a kid and that was a real store, I would probably have the best time of my life. Yes, fuck Disneyland, fuck Six Flags, and yes, even fuck BronyCon. Suck me into those MLB comics. I want to live the adventure of these books. Hell yes. But unfortunately, people had an issue with this too because it was a contrived plot convenience for a filler episode. And chances are it won't be explored upon any further. Honestly, if it isn't explored upon, I could care less. There isn't anything to go over except that there was a magic comic book that can turn a fiction into a reality. That's a pretty nice concept, and that hasn't taken into proper consideration according to the other reviewers. With that all said, though, most of the episode is admittedly a letdown. That doesn't mean the episode is terrible. In fact, I enjoyed this episode for what it was because there's a lot more that you could take from it than what you think. However, based on the reactions of this and the Mysterious Mirror Duel, I think it's pretty clear that the staff should stay away from comic book related themes. It's a bit of a shame too because they've done a pretty good job with other themes tackled on and prior, and a majority of people love reading comic books. At the very least, DHX, you tried. So until next time, I'm GoldenFox, and I will catch you all later.
Until then, I'm the voice of reason and... What was that?
Oh, nothing. Just a little experiment I had planning while you were searching for me.
What did you do?
Well, I wanted to see what happens if I threw a horror symbol into the rift, and would you know it, they appear to be multiplying.
You son of a... I'll be back for this!
That's what you get for shunning me out of the review.
When we were first introduced to Bat Ponies in Luna Eclipsed, I was rather confused and underwhelmed that there was yet another race of ponies. It didn't get into my head though, because I only found it to be a minor concern. After all, there are crystal ponies later on, and hopefully there might be some sea ponies. That all depends on what the creators decide. However, there were some hints here and there, and then there was fan art of Bat Ponies that were explored upon. And finally, we see a canon when the episode Bats aired. And to get this off my chest, Bat Ponies look badass. It was later something I was able to appreciate up to this point. I'm so glad it was introduced because now I wish I was a Bat Pony.
Hey Fox, sorry to interrupt you. Are you in the middle of anything?
Oh, that's fine, voice. What's up?
Just to give a warning to many analysts and reviewers, we're, having some strange issues in the riff right now, thanks to a certain orange pony that should not be named. Oh, not you, Fox, the other pony that should not be named. Well, there's a swarm of mysterious bats invading other channels, and there's been rumors of how notorious their bites are, so I'm just checking in each of you to warn you while I'm at it, so keep on guard.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Ow, my wing, you little shit!
Ah, crap, I'm so sorry about that, Fox. I'll take care of him. In case you feel anything strange, I'll get Dr. Wolf to check on you.
Thanks, voice. Ugh, that hurt. And it's not going away either. I don't feel so good. Ugh, what's happening to me? This is amazing! Look at me, I'm a bat pony! Man, the eyes, the ears, the fangs, and the wings. Oh, the wings. Mwah! Whatever it is that bat did to me, I can't thank it enough. You know, coincidentally, I should get back to talking about the episode Bats. What did I think about this episode? Well, despite its many shortcomings, I loved it. Even though the plot was thin and predictable, it didn't overwhelm me because it introduced me to something more for Applejack other than the other episodes. But I'm getting too ahead of myself here. The episode begins when Applejack is preparing for a day of apple bucking season, only to find out that the acres have been infested by fruit bats. They consume the apples dry, which becomes an issue on multiple levels, and honestly, I don't blame Applejack about the frustration with the bats. This becomes a territorial dispute, which was actually played out better than over a barrel. I'll get back to that in a bit. After the opening is over, her family members are away for the time being, so for once, she uses her brain and calls for help. After her lesson of acknowledging help in Applebuck season, this message was ignored, especially in Super Speedy, only to be relearned badly. But here, we see her excel her options. Applejack explains her issue of the main 6 and insists that she wants to get rid of the bats. Fluttershy, on the other hand, sees it from another perspective with the song. Stopping here for a bit, I can admire the Danny Elfman style of the song as it explains the setup. Much like May the Best Pet Win, it's played out in a Broadway style, establishing 2 viewpoints across. Obviously, Applejack's property is invaded, and the apples that she harvests is important for Ponyville. Fluttershy, being the obvious expert on the animals, is new with the fruit bats, so the lack of knowledge Fluttershy has can be overwhelming to others. But as Fluttershy understands, she sees them as a survival instinct which may have families to raise, as well as many other animals do on a general basis. Her belief is that making a sanctuary for the bats, keep them in one place instead of spreading them out and destroying the eggers, is beneficial, especially since theoretically the seeds can grow stronger trees. This is a pretty legitimate reason when you think about it, but on Applejack's side, her level of frustration gets the best out of her as well as the rest of the main 6. Their attempts are to lure them away and no longer lusting for the apples, as Fluttershy's positioned to make the stare to hold them off as Twilight uses a spell that diminishes their lust for apples. The plan on the bats work, but only to be a repercussive backfire as the lust gets reflected into Fluttershy. Here we see a build-up to when she becomes a bat pony, and from this point on, we see another problem that takes place.
If she keeps this up, your whole crop will be gone in no time.
That's the least of my worries. I just want my friend back.
Of course, Fluttershy is cornered by her reflections and is transformed back. A small chunk of the acres is shared to the bats as Fluttershy is addressed. Obviously, this is played out as an environmental message, and the conflict was heavily one-sided, being that Fluttershy was right the whole time. But the solution was more balanced than, let's say, Ferngully or Once Upon a Forest. Instead of just having a solution to benefit only one side, it's a solution for both sides. Bats had a balanced solution at the end of the episode, instead of favoring one side that environmental movies did. And even though it's beating you over the head, it's not a last-minute solution as Over a Barrel has. The plot is thin and utterly predictable. It's been done before, and that's also why people have an issue with this episode. That, I can't blame you for. Unfortunately, that's also perceived as an issue, and Twilight, who is the brains of many solutions, is randomly choosing to side with AJ. The other issues I had is that Dash is mentioning the amount of cider that could have been made into.
What about the cider? There was still cider, right?
Not a drop.
No cider? No cider! Think of the cider. Won't Somepony please think of the cider?
Do I really need to be reminded of that horrendous joke in Super Speedy Williams? It doesn't establish anything except be a callback to the episode. Yes, you could say that it could cost the Apple family their food and products, but this is hammered in too much. So it's not only subjective, but it's also pointless. What's also pointless is Spike randomly appearing in the middle of the episode.
Don't mention it, Applejack. It was my pleasure. Really.
Why? It makes Spike less favorable that way. In fact, in the rest of the episode, he didn't do anything, especially given what you've established in Power Ponies, which, by the way, was the previous episode. You're now dismissing him once more. That being said, though, I'm not bothered by the shortcomings. I was more engaged with the main story, which, while admittedly it was formulated, it feels rather refreshing to me and I love it. It was terrifically well paced with some metaphorical attributes like Power Ponies. Judged by Applejack's commitments turning Fluttershy into a monster, it reflects Fluttershy's viewpoint to what Applejack didn't see prior. That's pretty clever to do what it needs to do and get the message across. Territorial disputes and even peer pressure from Fluttershy's conflict. So ultimately, it makes 2 messages back to back, which is pretty difficult to pull off. Additionally, it carries another great sense of atmosphere like Castle-Maina, especially during the 3rd act. Meriwether Williams seems to be improving over time since I always nagged at her missed opportunities in the past, so I hope that she keeps up with what she's got.
Okay, so I got a hold of Dr. Wolf and oh my god. Well, that's a new look for you.
Hey, I'm cool with this. I'm a bat pony.
Well, I was gonna explain the good news and bad news, but I guess that's been switched around.
What do you mean?
Well, what the bat did to you was more bad news, but I guess you like it, so I consider that good. The actual good news, and what you consider bad, is that the venom only works temporarily.
What?
Well, I just lost my appetite for about 5 weeks.
Oh man, I'm back to my pony self again.
Hey, be thankful you're not immortal. That's what actual vampire ponies become, as well as being unsustainable to sunlight.
Oh, that's true. I should be careful on what to wish for next time.
Well, I can't blame you for wanting to be a vampire bat pony. After all, you look pretty cool as one.
But I guess all things have to come to an end sooner or later.
Well, I better check other channels to make sure everything's under control.
Okay, voice, good luck.
Thanks, Fox.
Okay, so awkward moment is awkward. Until next time, I'm GoldenFox, and I'll catch you all later. When I first watched the show, Applejack was my first favorite character until I started latching onto Twilight and Rainbow Dash being my next favorites. My feelings on Applejack started declining because of her lack of expansion and wasted potential, not to mention very little of her episodes were around or never did any favors for her. And this was a major letdown to me because the writers didn't seem to add much of anything other than she's a farmer. And as if that wasn't enough, no one wanted her episodes anymore. The big thing I want to see here is character expansion and character development, and so far Applejack has had very little of it. But every step of the way, she is slowly but surely progressing in Season 4. One of the major big examples is Pinkie Apple Pie, a cross episode of her and Pinkie. After viewing it, I felt very optimistic and happy. That's how much I was impressed with it. It was an episode about family, leaving an impression, and exploring an exciting answer in regards to what Pinkie was hoping to see. This was the episode Apple Family Reunion should have been. It's sweet, pleasantly well-paced. It's a simple filler that kept me engaged from there on out. We start off with Pinkie looking through the scroll when Twilight was studying genealogy. Why was she studying that instead of finding out information on the key box? I have no idea. Pinkie finds a piece of information on a scroll that may prove that she's a part of the Apple family trait. Immediately and excitedly, she runs to Applejack before the opening scene plays. At first, I felt crept out by the way she appeared, but given that she and Applejack knew each other for a long time, I felt rather excited along with.
I have another sister! I have another sister! Well, you actually have a fourth cousin twice removed by a fifth cousin, but that's exactly like a sister!
I mean, if a good friend of yours has a connected family trait, there's something warming inside about it that excites you. Unless that friend of yours acts too unacceptable from everyone else. But that isn't the case here. However, Applejack isn't completely sure and starts looking through the scroll. Pinkie insists on showing the line that supposedly proves her family trait. Unfortunately, the line is left completely smudged, unable to be read. Thankfully, Applejack knows a relative who has a book of her family tree named Golden Delicious, so they all plan a road trip to pay a visit and find out the answer from there. In advance, Applejack and the family strive to leave a good impression to Pinkie so that she won't get discouraged. This is one of the first major points that fascinated me. Unlike Apple Family Reunion, where too much of Applejack's desperations making a good time interrupts the many family members that we all got to know very little of, the family here is all equally served for the purpose and conflict. As they embark on their trip, they stumble upon some issues that each are merely responsible for. At the time, Applejack does what she can to keep herself under control with the rest of the members. It's a believable situation because these things happen realistically in life, family obligations and issues that overwhelm one another. Meanwhile, Pinkie Pie remains very optimistic the whole way, regardless of what the family is struggling with. She makes the best out of any mishaps that can be perceived differently, from the scary tunnel to the giant waterfall. At times I found her being a little too oblivious at times, which hurts the episode a bit. At the arrival of Golden's home, she looks at a note at the door only to admire the texture of the paper instead of actually reading it. But she still comes out pretty resourceful. At one point she advises the family to change the carriage and build it into a raft, and travel on the river in order to reach Golden. She keeps a book of memories for almost everything she's been with and remains optimistic. I should also go over the song in this episode, Apples to the Core. I remember seeing this from the Comic-Con previews and was very excited to hear it again, only fully animated, and it didn't disappoint. Just when I thought that Hearts as Strong as Horses was catching upbeat, Apples to the Core did it so much it brought me tears of joy, literally. It was a simple and emotional tune that connected with the plot of the story and how much of a value the family is. To this day, I still enjoy hearing this song, and it's become one of my favorite songs of Season 4, if not the entire series. Nearing to the end, the answer to whether or not Pinkie's a part of the family trait is still undefined, but Applejack nevertheless accepts Pinkie based on her productivity. At first I was skeptical about that, but when speculating Golden, the episode played good hints that may indicate Pinkie could be a part of the family based on the similar looks and actions she's carried. Differently, however, based on Pinkie's position as a farmer in Magical Mystery Cure, there's a possible indication that she may not be a part of the family and it could be a mistake. But putting aside my skepticism, it's a nice way to end the episode on a vague note where it's left up to the viewers to decide. Unless a later episode further clarifies that. The actual moral of the episode was that no family is ever perfect, which was on behalf of Applejack and her family's commitments. Other messages I was able to dig out was that even in the worst case scenarios you can make the best out of them, and Pinkie was there to show the way. Each of which I felt were very well balanced and played out pretty well. The downer, though, was that a squirrel was left on a tree covered in sap and no one does anything to help him out. There was also a scene where a duck took a broken steering wheel and was swapped away by an eagle. And then again, we see the same duck flying somewhere else. Maybe that could be a different one, I don't know. If the animators could just erase the squirrel, I would have been fine with that, as it doesn't really affect much of the story overall. Putting aside that, though, this was an episode that I highly appreciated. Definitely one of my favorites of Season 4 thus far. And now the next episode, we're diving into Rainbow Falls. And that's not going to end very well. Until next time, I'll catch you all later. In case you have not noticed, I've grown to not appreciate what Corey has written in the series so far. Sure, she wrote Sleepless in Ponyville, but she also wrote Just for Sidekicks. For those who don't know, I hated that episode because the story was completely unfair to Spike, and yet everyone bought into the idea thinking that Spike got what he deserved because he wasn't a good caregiver. He was taking blame in something that didn't even exist. I don't want to get too far off topic of that atrocity though. Yeah, there are a few episodes that get under my skin, and this was no exception. So with that all said and done, her episode Rainbow Falls just wasn't very good. And I'm not harping on her because of one episode I hated. There were good intentions on this episode, and it would have been done better, but it has a huge problem shoved right up its ass throughout the story. Dash recruits 2 members with her to assemble a team to participate for the tryouts in the Equestrian Games. Her members are Fluttershy and Bulk Biceps. Yes, that's what the staff named him now, not Snowflake. Real nice of you, DHX. After all the conventions you've attended to, you decided to shun the military cosplayer. But that's only nitpicking. The real issue with him I'm going to save for later. Proceeding on with the episode, they arrive at the tryouts, including the Griffins, who are sadly overlooked regardless of any notion to the viewers, and the Wonderbolts are included.
Nice to see there's some real competition here.
2 more days of practice, then we'll see you in the air, Rainbow Dash. If you're lucky.
During practice, Soren injures himself and is saved by Dash before falling to his death. As he gets taken to patient care, Spitfire is impressed with Dash's rescue attempts and implies that if Soren doesn't heal in time, Dash can take his place. Dash, on the other hand, states that she's with her team. And then this happens.
Who says they need to know? Think about it, Rainbow Dash. This is your chance to fly with the winners.
Wow. Just wow. This is the biggest issue that I have with the entire episode. The Wonderbolts are poorly portrayed as antagonists here. And that's a big deal because Dash wanted to be with the Wonderbolts was her first major story arc that was shoved in our faces since the beginning of this series. In previous episodes like Wonderbolts Academy, Spitfire was aggressive for mostly getting the new rookies in shape and prepared for the most challenging training courses. Even then, she acknowledged that there's pushing yourself forward, but there's also pushing yourself forward in a careless way that would cause potential havoc according to what Lightning Dust did previously. That showed how flawed she was in her own way, despite that she was a captain. In the best night ever, she was loyal and considerate with Soren and possibly her teammates whenever they were present. In this episode, she tosses him aside and even lies behind his back about not getting better in time for the games, just so that she can have advantage of getting Dash with her. What the hell happened to her? This is not the Spitfire that I knew. Yeah, she didn't have as much screen time throughout the series, but there's still a lot that I was able to know about her whenever she was around. She was prideful and tomboyish, but she was collective and respectful. It's like she's completely decided to become selfish. I can get that some would perceive her as a mirror to Dash's pride issues and so-called developed Spitfire in the long run. Except that's what Lightning Dust established in Wonderbolts Academy. So it's like repeating the same lesson with Spitfire. I know that there are times when characters are out of place, even in episodes that I liked, but this was a slap to the face of what Dash's original motives were. So because Rainbow Dash is pressured to choose a side, she fakes an injury in the most embarrassing way possible to forfeit the tryouts and refuse the decision. Since Twilight's the only one who's aware of how phony Dash's act is, she implies that choosing not to choose is not a real choice. After finding out the Soren was lied to so that Spitfire could replace him, Dash returns to the tryouts and spills the beans.
I faked my injury so that I wouldn't have to choose between flying for Ponyville or Cloudsdale. I wanted to fly with you both, and the decision was too hard.
Oh, Rainbow Dash, you don't have to choose us. I know you love to win, and you should go with the team that surely will.
Soren tags along with, as Spitfire recruits him back after admitting her faults, and he easily forgives her. What is it with this series and having last-minute redemptions? Having someone forgive one another in an instant is not a really good lesson to teach your children. There has to be a middle ground and a bit of a discussion to admit what wrongful commitments are in place. Pinkie Apple Pie did a better job at that. And of course, I need to get back to Bulk Bicep here. Why was he shoehorned in here? Why did you make him struggle to fly when he had no problem flying in Wonderbolt's academy, if not Hurricane Fluttershy? Why is he outside of the academy? Was he expelled? Was he demoted? Why would you even want him to be a character in the first place? He was a character who was made as a stero joke, and that was fine enough right there. In fact, why have both Bulk, Biceps, and Fluttershy alone?
Sorry we couldn't fly with you on the aerial relay, but the air sprinters needed us too.
Too bad we can only compete in one event.
Bullshit. There's a bunch of other Pegasi to choose from. Furthermore, you'll spend more effort to expand on him than side characters like Peach Bottom, Miss Harshwinning, Coco, and even Diamond Tiara, who you chucked her potential out the window of. Needless to say, this was a very frustrating episode for me to appreciate. On the other hand, there are things worth giving credit for. I admire the episode's ambition to what they tried having Dash confronted with, and in the end, it does end on a strong note that even though Dash will be competing with the Wonderbolts, Spitfire carries a bit of a sporty attitude by handing Dash her badge to provide respectful wishes, which is what she also had in Wonderbolt's Academy. It's also nice to consider that Twilight's active on this episode, unlike the previous episodes. I at least hope the Wonderbolts become a lot more fair and more likable later on. So far, I don't like what the staff did to them. All things considered, I didn't really like this episode that much. There could have been a lot more elements to the structure and story better. At the very least, it's not just for sidekicks. I still think that episode was awful in comparison. But so far, Rainbow Falls is my least favorite episode of the season. So until next time, Corey, you're better than this.
Your Highness?
Your Highness?
I'm teasing, Twilight. We're sisters-in-law. We don't have to be so formal.
Oh, really? You're not gonna do the Sunshine Rhyme again? Oh, I'm sorry, was that out loud? Flash Century, yeah. Why is Flash Century in this episode? Megan, you said that Equestria Girls wasn't canon. That's it. Worst episode of season 4. Oh my god. That's the stupidest excuse to hate an episode. Yeah, you got me again. I still love the Sunshine Rhyme. Now let's get on with the review already. Three's a Crowd feels very pointless to me. There's nothing new of what's added here other than being a filler episode. Even Pinkie Apple Pie had something much more going on. Here we have Discord, we have Cadence, and they're just in this episode. There isn't much of what's happening here other than Discord and his silly antics. Even worse, there's not much of a purpose to serve on its own. Recapping for a bit, he was a villain in Return to Harmony, reformed in Keep Calm and Flutter On, and a secret guidance to Twilight in the main 6 and Princess Twilight Sparkle, all of which served very good purposes outside of what he's been admired for. Here he just toys around with the two through the rest of the episode, because he wanted to test Twilight's friendship, and that's not really saying much. However, despite that, I was still entertained with this episode despite not having anything refreshing about it. As this episode begins, Fluttershy is sent away to the Equestrian Society of Preservation where she's invited to see a rare set of creatures called the Breezies. At the same time, Twilight and Cadence go to spend time together after finally meeting up for once outside of their royal duties. Unfortunately, Discord arrives claiming to be sick with the flu. And yes, I'm already calling it that he was faking his illness. I mean, the episode doesn't even try it.
Whomever shall I turn to now in my time of need?
He takes his antics towards Twilight and Cadence to his advantage. Of course, what follows is what Discord is known for, and that's something I can't really complain about. His silly and yet creative antics, including what goes on in the background. And as usual, John DeLancey enjoys playing his role. One thing I can't miss talking about though is his song Glass of Water. I'm a bit split over this song. For one thing, I didn't really like John's singing voice, though I will admit I did admire his charisma and charm that kept true to his character, and not to mention the random imagery that's thrown in our faces. We get a few references like Harry Potter and Aladdin's Friend Like Me, based on how reminiscent it is, and in general I like that Daniel Ingram added random tempo changes to fit the style of the song, most of which it feels heavily inspired by the composition of In the Hall of the Mountain King by the tempo speeding up accordingly. Another scene I have to talk about is the final act of the episode. When Discord tells them that there's a rare flower to cure his illness, Twilight and Cadence travel to a desert where it's located and encounter a Tazzleworm.
Get your coils off my
Going over the scene, I definitely appreciate that both of them help each other out, even in the most intense conflict they can imagine. Plus, I have to admit, Princess Cadence taking on the worm was pretty badass. In addition, Cadence didn't have much of an issue spending time dealing with Discord's antics.
Getting to face all these challenges today was just what I needed. And facing them with you just made me realize even more how lucky I am to have some pony like you as a friend.
Yeah, despite almost losing my sister-in-law by a vile creature.
At the end, Discord got what he deserved. Apparently he got sick after he was sneezed on from the tassel worm, in which he actually didn't know about when discussing the flower. I wasn't even aware that the tassel worm was sick, but whatever. And ultimately, while Discord's schemes were justified, the main six still remained supportive regardless of how Twilight was treated. See, that's how you end something with someone's moral, irresponsible actions. That's something Flight to the Finish should have had. Sadly though, the moral of this episode is basically making the best out of what you're dealing with and that expectations won't be as promised. This isn't a bad moral, but I've seen it presented better in The Best Night Ever. What I also didn't like was how shoehorned everyone else was and then fleshed out afterwards. After encountering them during the beginning of the episode, Discord purposely spread his so-called flu on Applejack and Rarity, and then they're back at the end no longer sick, as if nothing happened. Rainbow Dash just takes off and we never see her again, buried in little to no purpose at all. What was the point of having her in the first place? And then there's Pinkie Pie. Over the course of Season 4, Pinkie has been treated so poorly by the staff. They only show her oblivious juvenile behavior, which was very depressing for me. We all know that Pinkie Pie is a lot more dimensional than that, and it seems like the writers are completely deciding to chuck it out of the episode. Hopefully the next episode fixes that issue. That said and done, there's nothing really special here. Like I said, I just feel it's pointless. I guess maybe the writers wanted to include them in a regular episode instead of any special occasion to have, and have them originally adapted into the show. At the very least, the episode was okay. It most certainly didn't leave a bad taste in my mouth like Rainbow Falls did. So until next time, I'll catch you all in the next episode. Simple ways. I'm gonna call it right now, this just wasn't a good episode for me. It has many moments, sure, but ultimately it's a stupid bore fest based on an idea the writer was trying to think of. And I don't even care to talk about this episode in the slightest. There really isn't much for me to say here.
Gotcha!
Ow, my back! Hi, Mage.
What you doing?
Reviewing an episode.
Oh, what episode?
Simple Ways from Josh Haber.
Oh, that episode.
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy one for me to talk about. Maybe you have something to add here, and perhaps maybe we could just review together?
Sure, why not? Are, you going to get up?
Just give me a minute. Whoa!
There!
Okay. Simple Ways is nothing more than a stupid love triangle, and if you want my opinion, I don't care about love triangles. However, I wouldn't go as far as to rank this as low as some of my most hated episodes, because I know that there are those who are into romance stories or what have you. That, and I don't want to go over the roof until time passes by. But even in that regard, you cannot begin to tell how much I found the episode to be utterly stupid.
You can hardly call this a romance episode though, since there was no romance involved. Just a stalker stalking a pony who's stalking another pony and everyone's being dumb. Nothing romantic whatsoever. But anywho, let's start from the beginning.
The episode starts off with a voting election on who will set up a festival, and Rarity is elected. As usual, she goes with a fancy, upper-class style. And in addition, Trenderhoof is visiting Ponyville for the event. Rarity, for forced reasons, has a massive crush on him. But after his arrival and tours with Rarity, Trender is largely fascinated by the cultures of Earth ponies. After setting a hoof in Sweet Apple Acres, he spots Applejack and then develops a crush. Rarity gets upset, and that's when everything goes downhill.
Actually, I have several problems with the episode already, even before it goes downhill. I'm sure everyone already noticed, but why so many parties, Ponyville? It's like they have nothing better to do with their lives. And why is Rarity giving Ponyville a high society look? I know it's her thing, but that's not only costly, but it's also assuming that a small town like Ponyville is willing to look and act like something they're not and never were. Also, what's with the word chic and Rarity? First it was hotel chic and Rarity takes Manhattan, now this. Oh, but all of this is just little nitpicks in comparison to the next point I'll make later.
This was briefly pointed out by Joshua Scorcher, and to be honest, watching the town folk presenting various events don't seem to bother me that much. Yes, there's a lot out there, but I'm not in the slightest bit overwhelmed by them either. As long as the narrative and the story are presented well, that's all that matters to me. And that isn't the case here. My first issue with this episode is that Rarity and Applejack get smacked with the idiot stick, or at least for the most part Rarity. Applejack is obviously not as interested in Trender as he is with her. She's also aware that Rarity is in love with Trender. Let's not forget that Applejack has been the voice of reason in the past, most notably when she spoke to Rarity in Sisters Social. But in this episode, Applejack does nothing to solve the problem. She doesn't talk to Rarity about her desperation for Trender and reason with her. And because of this, Rarity gradually changes herself for Trender's sake. Because Trender is fascinated by the cultures of Earth ponies and labor, Rarity moves closer and closer to it, and then breaks away into being a Southern stereotype. I don't think I've cringed so much when seeing her in her final form.
Rarity is embarrassing to watch in this episode. Hey, GoldenFox, remember Prince Blueblood? Remember how Rarity was fangirling over him? How he was a stallion of her dreams? Also, remember how she had some common sense to eventually realize that Blueblood was another jerk to her and she shouldn't bother with a pony like that? Remember when she had dignity, pride, and standards? Notice how she's liking those here? I mean, Trender is obviously not into her and is ignoring her straight out. Rarity isn't the sort of lady to lower her standards and change who she is just to get some guy's attention. Isn't that why so many people started loving her? Because she's not the stereotypical fashionista girly girl that's all about getting her man's attention? I'm not the one who should judge if Rarity is in or out of character here, but I can safely say that this Rarity is not the Rarity I like seeing in the show.
Pulling 180s, I presume? Yeah, that's no surprise here after what Corey did with the Wonderbolts. My next issue, however, is Trender. It isn't that he's popped out of nowhere for Rarity to have a crush on, nor is it bothersome to me to have someone assumingly thought he was racist, if that's a word that even adds here other than exaggerating or being a stalker. Trender Hoof is a fucking moron. He's clueless, he speaks and acts without thinking, and he's just overall annoying and uninteresting. It's also irritating when you make someone like Trender Hoof a hipster stereotype and frame him the wrong way. If ideally you want to purposely make a scene that's over the top, silly, or unthinkable, it's a little delicate as to how you manage it, and so far, that wasn't the case here.
A lot of people may disagree with me, but I didn't dislike Trenderhoof so much. Now, that is not to say he wasn't an idiot in this episode, but who wasn't really? He just had the unfortune of being a one-off character in a mediocre at best episode. I think what they were trying to do with Trender was an adorable guy that a bit naive and out of touch with reality, but not inherently a bad guy. Sure, his Applejack obsession can be several kinds of creepy, but AJ was too busy rolling her eyes and mumbling snark to actually tell the clueless guy to his face that she's not interested and that he should stop because she's uncomfortable. He happily listens to Rarity's advice at the end of the episode, no reason for him not to listen to AJ. Now, to her credit, Applejack did initially try to tell him his company was not exactly welcomed, but it was sort of interrupted by Rarity and wasn't exactly direct.
So instead of talking to either Rarity or Trender in advance, we come to the final act of when Rarity is an utter southern stereotype, as I pointed out, and Applejack reveals an address which many call her Apple Jewel. Oh shit! Don't mind that, folks. Now, a switcheroo concept doesn't sound too bad of an idea, and a majority of the act plays out decently. Some people found this to be funny, and admittedly I can understand that, but I didn't so much as laugh at the scene. But at the very least, I could see what Josh was trying to go for here. Unfortunately, while Applejack tries convincing Rarity of who she should be, it almost feels like the two of them were against each other given how mawkish they were acting. I get that it was the real intentions, but when seeing Rarity change her personality, and let's not forget dressing up Apple Bloom in southern clothes when in actuality she already is a southern character, it almost threw me off guard. But it also begs the question as to why a love triangle was even necessary to begin with. Anything could have resulted in having their personality switched around as having the moral in that you shouldn't change yourself for the sake of others. I don't want to go against having relationship plots, but at least it could have served a better purpose.
The argument between the two was hard to watch for me. I would never expect to either of them, both ladies who value their pride, to stoop so low to a kindergarten-level argument. It was meant to be funny, to make the audience laugh, I get it, but that's the problem. They made a joke at the expense of the characters. It feels like most of Season 4 is like that, valuing the jokes above the characters, changing what we know about them just to make the jokes work. That's really sad, you know?
Despite some moments the episode has, it is dull, uninteresting, thin on its plot, and just overall feels sloppy. Some scenes are just uncomfortable and moronic to watch, as others are there just for the sake of laughs. But what's disappointing to me is that it's all what it was trying to go for despite its intended message. There's nothing really refreshing about it, nor is it handled very well either.
This episode is just another step for MLP into becoming another generic children cartoon. Its gags are dumb, predictable, and have been seen executed in many other pieces of media in similar ways. It brings nothing new to the table, and it throws in several unnecessary elements into the mix, causing confusion, such as: why pick the party organized just 3 days before the actual party? Parties that big take longer to organize and prepare for. In addition to that, Verity spends all her time chasing after Thunder to properly prepare for the party. Her friends keep reminding her of the time. It'll only be natural to see her fail at the party planning in the end, but no, it goes off without a hitch.
Mage?
If the time limit was that unimportant, why have it there at all? Why have her friends fret about the limited time if everything is perfect in the end anyway? Why can't our heroes sometimes fail and learn the lesson from failure? Why is it Verity the one delivering the moral to Thunder while she was the one who was supposed to learn a lesson?
Mage.
I hated how the end is so ideal with everything coming out okay. That's not how the world works. Not ours, not theirs. There is consequence to your action, and sometimes discovering something within yourself or realizing you've made a mistake and saying sorry is not enough. You should pay for your mistakes because sometimes it's just too late to fix the problem, and you have to learn to live with it.
Mage!
Huh?
For fuck's sake, your Lethal Aurora was showing.
Has she? Sorry, but yeah, I didn't like this episode.
The background. Hold on a second. There. That's better. Now, I am aware that there's a good number of people who actually enjoyed this episode and got some good laughs out of it. In that case, that's fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. In fact, if you are a fan of this episode, check out Salespec's review on it. She's a lot more positive. So until next time, thank you all for watching. And Mage, thank you for providing me your insight. Mage? Mage? Annie Pony?
No spook. Thanks for having me, Goldie. Bye-bye.
Don't mention it.
Every pony staring at you, judging you, jealously noting how they could be way better than you. Why wasn't it them? Why wasn't it them? And then, when you choke, they'll turn on you, becoming a siege in every mode, and then
My god! Amy, what did you do to Pinkie Pie? I'll go as far as to mention that when I was a kid, I had an admiration for singing. My parents complimented my singing voice as well as my teachers when I was in grade school, but I was not very comfortable talking about it. What pours salt in the open wound here is that I built a microphone out of Legos and sang an entire album of Katie Lang when I was 4 years old. I was an idiot back then. The more I talk about it, the more embarrassed I feel. The point I bring up here is that when it comes to stage fright, I can relate to that issue, especially on Fluttershy's behalf for the episode Filli Vanilli. It's a joyful episode, a fun song is added, and a conflict that is believable to see. Then there's that one issue that I'm going to have to save for later. Filli Vanilli is once again a Fluttershy episode about dealing with one's fears. It begins with a friend discovering her talent of singing. Given how impressed they are with her voice, Rarity highly recommends her to join a quartet, but since she has stage fright, Fluttershy refuses to participate. That isn't until Big Mac loses his singing voice over a competition, and thus he cannot perform.
lost his voice and the title.
However, Fluttershy gets the idea to lower the pitch of her voice by having Sakura use the poison joke as she sings backstage for Big Mac to synchronize with. Yeah, I can hear Voice of Reason screaming profanity right about now.
Why? Why would you reference worst episode? Do you realize you made the poison joke make even less sense in canon?
The quartet succeeds in a wide amount of performances, and thanks to this, Fluttershy continues to volunteer with more performances, until she eventually gets too carried away. At her last performance, she's caught by the crowd after getting too far and knocking off the curtains and completely exposing herself. At first I thought the episode tried to put Herky and Fluttershy to shame by borrowing a lot of its elements, but thinking a little more carefully, there's been multiple episodes about her fears of stage fright in the past. A few exceptions within other reasons, nonetheless the concept worked. Having the ability to sing and facing stage fright was well presented. Not to mention when she was caught by the crowd, we saw one of her surrealistic visuals that presented her freakouts, just like in Hurricane Fluttershy when she was overwhelmed by her fears of her childhood. It's definitely a good emphasis. The episode itself feels very gentle and sweet towards the scenes with the quartet. The song they perform is catchy, and it definitely has something we're jamming to every time you hear it. Though it's a little too generic, but it helps with the main story. In addition, we get a scene with two Pegasi on one in their performance.
That was fantastic, Ponytones!
My new puppy and I thought it was super duper crazy good.
Why, thank you!
And we were wondering if you would consider performing at my daughter Zipperwill's quinceañera.
Will you?
I don't know if I'm the only one here, but that was adorable. I actually want to see more of these two. So, with much of this going, there's that one major issue I have to get back to. Pinkie Pie.
I mean, the curtain came up, and there you were, singing in front of every pony. And you know, I don't think any pony was jealous, because there certainly wasn't an angry mob, but it must have been horrible standing there on stage, all eyes glued directly on you. It's like you were living your own personal worst nightmare!
Okay, Amy, you had Pinkie Pie make Fluttershy cry once, but a second time is unforgivable. Did you forget Griffin the Brush-Off when Pinkie Pie knew the sensitivities of Fluttershy to begin with in Season 1? Apparently this was a large cry in the fandom, and I clearly don't blame them. Pinkie Pie, as a character who you always look up to optimistically, is a complete asshole. Believe it or not, Amy Keating Rogers defended her arguments as she posted on Twitter that Pinkie Pie will speak without thinking. Here's my response. Amy, you're right. She will speak without thinking, as naturally a lot of us will speak without thinking. Yes, she's animated. Yes, she's zany. And yes, she's naive. But she's not that oblivious. She's not an idiot, and most certainly she's not an asshole. In your other episode, Pinkie Pride, she knew when to stop when realizing Dash wasn't having a good time when she was crushed by the piñata. In a further example, you tweeted that she embarrassed Cranky when shouting out how bald he was. That was because she was trying to reason with the folks when she needed a wig to replace the other wig she wrecked by accident. Pinkie wasn't trying to humiliate him, she was trying to help him. And the episode made it perfectly clear of what she was trying to do. And in the end, she was apologetic about it and was self-aware, regardless of the repercussions of backfires. Here, not only does she rudely and demonically make Fluttershy uncomfortable, not only did she become completely unaware of when to stop, not only did she not even bother to apologize for her behavior, these scenes were pointless! You could have taken her out, and nothing would have changed the episode's narrative if not for the better. Now I know what some of you are thinking. What about in Luna Eclipse when she portrayed Luna as a problem? What about her actions in Bridal Gossip? And of course, what about her non-stop rambling in the last roundup towards Applejack? Starting with Luna Eclipse, she was so focused on enjoying her holiday that she was unaware of Luna's feelings, and that happens to a lot of us a lot more often, believe it or not. All of that was the result of a misunderstanding, and as a benefit, it turned out that kids were having fun being scared. Furthermore, when she came face to face with Luna in the alleyway, she was going to accept Luna's friendship before it was interrupted by Dash's prank. Pinkie wasn't trying to be a dick to her, she was trying to have a good time. Again, she's not trying to be an asshole. And this was beneficial to Luna's conflict in the end. In the last roundup, yes, she was rambling in front of Applejack on purpose, but that was to get her to talk and explain why she refused to return to Ponyville. Even more so, Pinkie was willing to listen and be aware of how upset she was when Applejack's Pinkie promise was broken. In Bridal Gossip, everyone was a dick, but Pinkie did nothing in that regard except come up with a song and become a victim of the poison joke. She was hardly a dick in the first place, and that was hardly because she was challenged by her fears. And the sooner I don't talk about Super Speedy, the better. It's not really me pointing out that she's out of character. On a technicality, she is in character. But the real issue is placing her in the wrong position, Amy. I know you can write better than that. I don't care if this was meant to be humorous or portray in a dark light. This was bad writing. It served no purpose, and it hurt the episode so bad because of how unpleasant the scenes were. Pinkie is a character to look up to, not to be looked down upon. She is formerly known to make others smile and share optimism, and this episode completely contradicted that. Yes, she's flawed, but other episodes have demonstrated that better. I would even go as far as to say that I loved a friend indeed because of pointing out her flaws, despite how everybody else felt. Even after Pinkie Pride, when you finally fixed her, Pinkie in this episode was by far her worst portray in this episode of this season, if not the entire series. And when I find her behavior worse than the way she acted in Super Speedy, that hurts! And it's not so much as my intention to place her on the pedestal. I expect the entire main six to be likable. Pulling 180s does not help anything. It pisses me off. Making Spitfire despicable in Rainbow Falls does not work. Making Rarity a fucking idiot in simple ways does not work. Same thing here. It doesn't enhance or give depth to the characters, it just pisses me off. Now, with that out of my system, the rest of the episode was great to watch. The concept was still refreshing to say the least, the music was fun, and Fluttershy was relatable on behalf of her conflict with the crowd as established before. In the end, she faced her stage fright only in front of the main 600 critters, and only go as far as to take baby steps along the way. Comparatively, this benefits her previous episodes that had that same formula. Yes, she's still timid and shy, and that'll never change. She's nonetheless still developing, and that shows when we saw her freaking out over her own shadow in Season 1, and then facing the Dark Lord of Chaos in a much later episode. If you can put aside Pinkie's Notorious antics, you'll be in it for a good episode. Otherwise, prepare to have your wounds torn open. Until next time, I'm GoldenFox, and I need a glass of water.
Did Somepony say a glass of water?
Shut up, Discord!
Twilight time! Twilight time! Twilight time! Twilight time!
Ugh, tough crowd. And to think young fillies and colts were adorable. Yikes. So after a while, we're given another CMC episode, but instead of focus on one of the major story arcs this season, we're back to the progression of the CMC's own motives. For the most part, that is. The episode deals with popularity issues, which is admittedly a good topic to tackle on, but it's done in a very clunky way. As the episode begins, the CMC are given challenges from Twilight as she mentions them in the library. Now this right here is a very nice direction for the CMC to take on, instead of looking for their own skills for the sake of getting a cutie mark as we've seen in the other episodes. But then the episode jumps to the next topic when Diamond discovers what's going on with the CMC, and she wants to get involved. She begs to join in, and the CMC of course accept her, and as usual she takes advantage of them once again. This time, instead of utterly teasing them like she used to in the past, she tries to be friends with the CMC. For the wrong reasons, of course.
Princess Twilight, it is such a thrill and honor to be here. You have no idea. Oh my gosh, who dyes your tail? I so have to get that done.
Actually, it's not dyed. I've always...
Are those books in there? What a bold design choice. You should so do that dye. I know, right?
Now, I didn't find this to be too big of an issue. Naturally, when it comes to popularity, they're always wanting to get involved. Still though, that doesn't make up for what Diamond did with Scootaloo in Flight to the Finish. Yeah, I'm gonna continue to hold on to that. Anyway, after she gets accepted, she spreads the word out and places the CMC on a high pedestal as they're ranked as high popularity.
Now, every pony. Demanding time with a princess as an unruly mob simply won't do. Might I suggest you get organized through us, the Cutie Mark Crusaders' nearest and dearest friends? Every pony gets line! No pushing! No pushing!
Sweetie Belle and the rest try to resort and manage everything by keeping their popularity status hidden from Twilight before it gets completely out of control. What bothers me is that with the topic at hand, it's very clunky and the pacing gets all over the place. On the one hand, they try to avoid any of Twilight's notions, but at the same time, there's no believable standpoint on how they feel being under the spotlight. The episode shifts back and forth on what they're trying to manage, and it overshadows what the topic was trying to tackle on. We do get a good glimpse of it as we see them attend at a lemonade stand and their so-called pool party at Diamond's house. Yeah, you tell that to your friends at the gate. But it moves by so fast, it hardly exists to me. It also disappoints me that there isn't much of their time spent with Twilight in order to progress their talents, mainly because of the forced plot. So neither of these two are tied correctly, and it overall feels like the episode has a huge lack of focus. I guess maybe Pipsqueak's second appearance where he talks about the wrong ways of getting popular could benefit the topic, but because of how procrastinated it gets, it feels like a disservice to the writing. Presumably, the CMC's interactions with Twilight may result in setting the CMC's progression for the series, and that's something to take for granted. But what pisses me off though is that it's constantly placed on the sidelines just for the sake of having a formulated plot for an episode. Same thing can be said with the many other seasonal arcs that that are constantly placed on the sidelines until we get actual episodes based on their traits. The symbolic keys appear like the show doesn't give a shit, and the Equestrian Games only have 2 episodes about it thus far, and little to no explanation about it. Thankfully, there's a blueprint of the key box posted in the background, which only hints at us. It would be nice if it was more focused on that instead of, once again, placing it on the sidelines. But it's also nice to consider the devotions that Twilight has for the Fillies according to the scene when she's at the diner.
When you first asked me to help you develop new skills, I thought, working with young students so devoted to the joy of learning purely for its own sake? What could be better? You all remind me of myself when I was your age.
There's a possible theory that with the restoration of the Sisters' Castle, Twilight could rule over it and have something in line for the young Fillies. I could be overanalyzing this, but if this were the case, I would definitely be up for that, passing her knowledge to one another and encouraging it. As I'm diving into more of what I found enjoyable, it does have a lighthearted atmosphere to it, and it's sustainably lighthearted unlike the last episode, Filli Vanilli, when Pinkie made the episode occasionally mean-spirited to the deep ends of the earth. It's also worth mentioning that Pinkie is in this episode for a brief time, and thankfully she's not portrayed as a dick. In addition, we see her work as a waitress, potentially showing that she might have a secondary job instead of working at a bakery. Also, while some people found the diner to be random and out of place, I found it to be a nice welcome to world building in Ponyville instead of having large barn houses all the time. By the end, while the episode meanders, we see that the CMC developed their skills, and the episode opens up potentially for something later down the line. Sadly though, the episode feels too clunky and rushed, as if there had to be a topic to tackle on hand, when really, the focus of the episode could have been about the CMC's skills and the progression of looking up to others for suggestions. I still like the episode nonetheless, but there could have been much more to organize and properly lay out. Hell, it would have been nice just to see the two split into individual episodes. By then, I would appreciate it more. But beggars can't be choosers. So until next time, this is GoldenFox, and I'll catch you all later.
Ooh, you must be so proud. And you speak my language too? I can. This lot can only understand you. Clearly, they're not the brightest bunch around.
Is that accent supposed to be Scottish or Irish? I remember in Three's a Crowd when Fluttershy mentioned the Breezies. When I heard that an episode about the Breezes was on its way, I was actually expecting Three's a Crowd to be a foreshadow towards an episode that would connect with it. It was at this point I thought to myself that Three's a Crowd wouldn't be as pointless as I thought it would. Apparently that wasn't the case, and it's a bit of a shame too, especially given how connecting just for sidekicks in games Ponies play was a pointless gesture. But that's only nitpicking. Nevertheless, we have It Ain't Easy Being Breezies. And once again, we're on another polarizing episode. Gee, ain't that a surprise. And what's crazier is that Tommy Oliver placed this as the worst and his most hated episode of the series. Okay, it can't be that bad, can it? Seriously, fandom, why do you have to stretch me on split episodes every time? Anyway, this episode, as obvious, is an introduction of the new species. They're insect creatures that are so defenseless that upon arrival when they were breezing through Ponyville, a small pack is left behind after a flow was interrupted by a leaf. Spike is blamed for this, but I'm gonna have to save her for later. Fluttershy saves the small group and escorts them to safety, and it's here we're introduced to the leader of the pack, Seabreeze. He's the only one who could communicate with Fluttershy, and most of the episode we see how frustrated and aggressive he is. For the reasons being, Fluttershy keeps the rest of the Breezes held in her home, while his concern is trying to get them back home to begin with. This is because based on their journey where the Breezes arrive in Equestria to collect pollen and other resources despite their physical travel, they arrive through a portal which won't last very long and the Breezes need to get home before it closes, or they won't ever see their family members again. So this brings up many complaints I hear in the fandom. Why would the rest of the Breezies take advantage of Fluttershy when clearly they have family members and relatives to look out for? Another complaint is that the mythology and the lore of the creatures aren't fully explored on, as well as the value of the pollens, why they're defenseless, or why the town folk would be so supportive to them. First and foremost, that's not the point of the episode. Sure, there may have been many things to be explored upon, but that would have taken more than just this episode. But the real focus was on the testament on kindness towards Fluttershy. I even saw that coming from a mile away. In addition, Seabreeze was a great character to me. He had his reasons for his aggressions, and clearly it showed. The interactions between the two were pretty believable to me. I know that many are going to argue with me on that part for the episode, but it effectively did what was needed. In fact, the best scene was when Fluttershy stood up against the bees when Seabreeze was cornered. At one point, she politely told them to back away, then she stood up to get aggressive.
Excuse me! I have done nothing but be kind, but I guess that is not working. You bees know better than to hurt a helpless Breezy. I demand that you go away now, or you'll have to answer to me!
The moral of the episode is that there's being too kind and there's being too aggressive. The unbalanced nature of these characters provided it pretty well, and it's pretty much what got me into Fluttershy's interactions with Seabreeze. By the end, Fluttershy's attempts to get the rest of the Breezes to leave was a difficult moment for her. To me, the scene worked. This leads me to one of the other following complaints: why the Breezes refused to leave in the episode despite having family members to look out for. Here's where my viewpoint stands. In comparison with the Odyssey, Odysseus and his crew members arrived on a land at one point as they nourished on lotus fruits and plants. It put them in a mindset of relaxing and refusing to leave as their memories of their homeland were being forgotten. Odysseus had no choice but to force them back on the ship as his men were tied to the mast as he sailed off. Another story that was similar was in Guardians of Ga'Hoole. In Book 2, The Journey, Soren and his friends ran into the Mirror Lake, where their reflections showed themselves in an attractive state. Ever since then, they enjoyed themselves so much that Miss Plithifer had to get them to continue their journey and find the Ga'Hoole tree. Point being, despite however mind-controlling these scenes were, luxury and hospitality can get the best out of you. Nowadays, a lot of us don't like working or going to school. We all want to excuse ourselves from labor and do things we want to do. In our lives, we learn to reach out our comfort zones in order to grow, and not that many people intend to do so. I'm also guilty of that. There's that, and given how defenseless they are in Equestria, it'd be like us entering the planets of predators or xenomorphs. They don't want to continue from where they left off. Again, an odd comparison, but what dangers are they used to in their environment? Yes, the Breezes aren't explained as much either, and I understand the complaints with them. Either a later episode would suffice that, or it won't. Either way, this potential doesn't matter to me as much as wanting the main characters to grow and develop. In fact, the next episode further exemplifies that, as it's one of the most disappointing episodes I've seen this season, if not the entire series. That's why I wasn't bothered with the wasted potential of the Breezes. It also was already clear that it was a toy advertisement. Just like with the Crystal Ponies, they aren't explained as well either. But I'm not bothered by it either because it's about the main six. The entire series is an advert for toys, and while that is a bothersome fact, you could still make good narratives out of them, and the series has proven that in the past. That's also why I wasn't bothered with the main six being transformed into Breezies. Though if I were to nitpick, I didn't like the Chimpette styled voice. Yeah, like I really needed to be reminded of that abomination that ruined Disney's potential to usher a new age. So on a whole, despite the very shortcomings this episode has, I enjoyed it nonetheless. Sure, there are many things that could have made it better. Sure, it could have been just centered on Fluttershy and the Breezes alone without the need of shoehorning the main six in. It is, after all, a key episode presented differently in contrast to everyone else's elemental counterparts. But the episode could have been a lot worse. I don't agree with Tommy Oliver's viewpoint. It was okay, to say the least. So until next time, this is GoldenFox, and I'll catch you on the 17 Curse. So here we are on the 17th episode of the season. The 17 Curse, in other words. Okay, so to shortly explain this, some people have lately discovered certain numbers in an episode that have been rather notorious. Taking the 8th episode of a season, for instance, had the obvious, overhated, mysterious Ne'er-do-well from Season 2, Look Before You Sleep, which I still can't grasp why people hate it, and Season 3's Apple Family Reunion, which I just thought it was only a dull episode. Rarity Takes Manhattan broke that curse, thankfully, though I can't guarantee that to everyone, since some people may not have liked that episode. Then there's 21. Season 1's Over a Barrel, and Season 2's Dragon Quest. Obviously, Season 3 didn't have that because, 13 episodes and all. I didn't really hate these two, though I was pretty fussy on how many of the missed opportunities were on Spike on Dragon Quest, and Over a Barrel was just framed incorrectly. So back to 17. Season 1 Stairmaster was my most hated episode of the season because of its poor writing, obnoxiousness of the CMC, and going nowhere with them, and nearly killing off our main protagonist. The sooner Season 4 ends, the sooner I'll rip that episode to shreds. And there's Hearts and Hooves Day, which doesn't need to be further explained given that what's been said already from the fandom. So it is no surprise here at all when I say that I didn't like this episode. Somepony to Watch Over Me has a huge problem shoved right up its ass from the very beginning, and it doesn't take into effect until we're later down the line. As the episode begins, Apple Bloom is given a chance to live alone on the farm while the rest of the family are set to make a trip down to a distant village for a pie delivery. Now this right here is a great concept because of Apple Bloom's potential character growth, and for the most part while she's alone, she does a great job at finishing her assigned chores and simultaneously being responsible.
Since there's no one else here, I get to make all the decisions. If I want to listen to music, I can. If I want to read a book, I can. If I want to just stand here in the kitchen talking to myself, I can.
I can relate to this when I was 12 years old and when I was being left alone. And it was a great and exciting experience. All the privacy you have to yourself, all the freedom you have to yourself, and all the opportunity to show how much you can handle yourself overall. And for the most part, the first quarter definitely delivered on that topic so well. This comes from someone who's the youngest member of the family. It would have been great just right there to see Apple Bloom take action and potentially develop her character. That isn't until Applejack rushes back home, ditches her job, and pampers the hell out of Apple Bloom so much because of how insecure she feels. Okay, so instead of an episode about self-reliability, it's now about being overprotective. This is what shoved up the episode's ass so hard. It has several missed opportunities here to progress the main characters. There were topics you can dig up and potentially make up for on the hating trend with Applejack or Apple Bloom. I personally want them to develop and have something more outside of what they were known for. I mean, Jesus, Applejack was my first favorite character in the series until it went downhill afterwards, and that's depressing for me. And out of all of these progressive concepts, this episode abandoned them all. I couldn't find anything more disappointing in the episode after that. At least with Twilight Time, it establishes its topics while remaining harmless despite how clunky the script was. If this episode was supposed to be about relying on self-independence, that's fine, but if you're going to add a topic about being overprotective, then you're not properly devoting to Apple Bloom's character growth because it's not allowing herself to be independent in the first place. Self-independence and overprotectiveness are two different topics that can't mix together in one. Yes, the topics are relevant, but overprotectiveness is just going to dominate over self-reliability. This episode should have been just about Apple Bloom taking care of herself, alone, but instead they try to shove in another topic which overthrows what the episode was originally set up for. So because of how irritated she was, Apple Bloom uses her friends to distract Applejack by impersonating her while she leaves the house and embarks to take the carts to the village. This then leads up to when she encounters a three-headed monster in some kind of volcanic swamp called the Chimera. This creature has the head of a tiger, a goat, and a snake, all of which had something potentially threatening. But for the most part, they just come off stupid and the results indicate them being stupid during an action scene. Most of the time, we see Apple Bloom managing herself on what to do, and for the most part I was fine with. But then she gets cornered and wishes help from his sister.
Any last words?
I really wish my sister were here.
Well, so much for trying to prove how self-independent you are. And what's even worse, we're given this line from the Chimera.
You're lucky, you know. You've got no idea what it's like to have a sister constantly looking over your shoulder.
And that's never used again. Apple Bloom could have had the chance to share her issues with the Chimera and possibly come to a closure, but instead we have to have another action scene with Applejack rescuing her. This, once again, goes against what Apple Bloom was set up for, and what's even worse is that at the end of the episode, she's potentially grounded for the entire scenario as if it's her fault, and Applejack is only going to rely on her sister by only leaving her at home instead of relying on her taking care of distant tasks. On a side note, this is briefly why I wasn't as discouraged with the moral in which Joshua Scorcher and Mysterious Mr. Enter were. Trusting her sister after taking the risk of her life over pies was actually reevaluated, given that Applejack was actually upset about what Apple Bloom's attempts were. But what's problematic here is that this is entirely Applejack's fault to begin with by leaving her own job and preventing Apple Bloom's self-reliability in the first place. And because she's only going to be counted on by being at home alone, how will she grow to make delivery tasks when she gets older? That's not going to help her develop at all. There are some things I was able to appreciate. Many have pointed out that since her parents are dead, it would seem more natural that Applejack would be this overprotective. While that is true, however, Applejack's parents were never mentioned to begin with, and they never will be mentioned because it's something the show just isn't allowed to talk about. I only rely on what the show offers alone and no external material in order for the show to stand on its own. So her parents being dead don't really count to me. But if this is what you perceive it as, that's fine. Otherwise, it's still an issue to me though, since it's what corrupted the plot of the episode. I was also surprised that a musical number was added, only to be cut off. Since the season has had several musical numbers before, it was nice to see how it would parody itself in this scene. That being said though, this episode was a mess, and it hurts for me to say that because of all of what it had going for, only resulting in relentless outcomes. What fucking waste. Hopefully in a later episode, more progression might ensue. So until next time, I'll catch you all in the next episode. Wow, is that a strong mare. At first I thought Mod Pie wasn't much of an episode for me to talk about, but admittedly there's more of what's offered upon watching it more. It's a bit of how I perceive some possible corrections that needed to be made on behalf of whether the viewers or myself had issues with in other episodes. In fact, there are some I'll be comparing to in which I feel this episode makes up for. In a way. There are things I feel did right compared to other episodes in which I felt did wrong. It's a little subjective to say the least, but I'm getting too ahead of myself here. As the episode begins, Pinkie's working on some rock candy to prepare for the arrival of one of her sisters, Mod Pie, hence the title. The main six participate by trying them out and later getting to know Mod by the time she's present. What we see is that Mod has a strange, quirky obsession with rocks. She has a rock for a pet, she writes poems about rocks, she eats rocks, and she's pretty much more focused and speculative on rocks in general.
Rock. You are a rock. Gray. You are gray. Like a rock. Which you are. Sedimentary.
Would you care to try one of Granny Smith's famous apple spice muffins? Oh, that's not,
It's crunchy.
You would think that it would seem one-dimensional for her to be like that, but what's shown here in this episode is far more in depth in a subtle way. For the most part, the episode frames it humorously. Specifically, lots of anti-jokes are shown, and while I didn't really laugh per se, I still got something out of it. I guess that's the point of what anti-humor is, as well as being predictable. Or maybe I'm just overanalyzing this. Either way, it just felt like it worked. In addition to what made Mod Pie work as a character is that despite the anti-humor, she bears a nice contrast with what Pinkie has. We all know how out of control Pinkie gets, and seeing how much more subtle and monotone Mod is, it's an appreciative effort in exploring on the differences. Most relatively though, Mod still cares for Pinkie. Even in the most disastrous scenario possible, it's shown that she's capable and will stop at nothing. So even though they're different, they still have a sisterhood connection. It's a bit of a trope that's been done before, but for the most part, it seems to work here. Getting back to the plot is on behalf of Pinkie. Her goal was to connect her friends with Mod, and sadly, it doesn't go as fulfilling. The main six had no choice but to confess it to her, which is pretty broken down to her. But in a desperate attempt, she goes to make an obstacle course for everyone by their interests matched together, which in short is a disastrous result. However, the value in the final act leads me to talking about the faults that made up for the show. For starters, Pinkie. In Amy's defense on behalf of Filli Vanilli, she implied that she will act without thinking and thus become an excuse as to excessively disturb Fluttershy and make her cry. Twice. Now, many have said that Pinkie isn't a perfect character. While that's admittedly true, every character has flaws. However, there's a right and wrong way of portraying a character with what flaws they have. Making them unlikable when they meant to be likable in all actuality goes against what the viewers perceive them as both Filli Vanilli and Rainbow Falls committed this mistake. The final act in this episode demonstrated her flaws a lot better. While understandable, what she intended nonetheless was going to be disastrous. It was an act without thinking, and she admitted it.
Pinkie Pie, what were you thinking?
I guess I wasn't.
I know how important it is to you that your friends become my friends, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
This was her flaw being addressed correctly instead of doing it for humor's sake. It wasn't unpleasant, it wasn't unbearable, it was relatable, and it was emotionally well connected. In addition to the moral of the episode is that not everyone can accept being friends. On a similar topic, many viewers were upset that A Friend Indeed didn't address this moral when they expected it to be. To me, I didn't perceive it as that, but I won't go too far on what I thought of A Friend Indeed as. But I will say, however, that this episode provided the message of what the viewers wanted. Even more so, Maud willingly told her how desperate Pinkie was, and despite not being connected successfully, Maud and the main six respected each other for who they were. And that's a better way to end it on a high note. All things considered, this has gradually become one of my favorite episodes of the season. The minor downside is that we don't really get to see much of Pinkie's family, but we at least get to know one of her relatives for once. Even if you have to have an artistic backstory presented to suffice what the episode has to offer, then so be it. I still love the episode nevertheless. Its humor is dynamic, the character interactions is believable, and ultimately it hit the right notes to make the episode pretty satisfying for me. At first there's not much for me to talk about, but I think it's better if watched a bit more, and further speculated. By then you might dig more out of it. Or not, I could be wrong. So until next time, this is GoldenFox, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. I don't know what's more depressing this season, the lack of focus on the main seasonal arc, the destruction of the character's original motives, or these ridiculous titles of this fucking season. And where the hell is Eliora? I expected her to be here for this collab 10 minutes ago. Ellie, what the hell are you wearing? Oh my god.
You really do need to get that checked, you know.
It's not really helping if you're wearing that. Why are you wearing that?
Because it's one of the Wonderbolt uniforms and it looks good on me.
Okay, but does it have to be that, attractive?
Nah, I just wanted to see how long until it got you. It was a lot faster than I thought it would be, though.
I don't like where this is going. Arrivederci!
Oh, no you don't. No abandoning your video. Not unless you're trying to give your channel to me, of course.
That's not really possible. You don't even know my password. Okay, fine, we'll just do it. But try not to tease me when you're wearing that. Anyways, I can't believe I'm saying the title here. Testing, 1, 2, 3. I think this has become the stupidest title on the show. Now, that's not to say there's anything wrong with the episode, but Amy, seriously?
It's still more creative than Bats, but yeah, that is kinda lame. Still, it fits. The plot of the episode is Rainbow needs to prepare for an exam to get into the Wonderbolt reserves. Of course, Rainbow is far more an active soul than a studious one, so our resident bookworm, Princess, takes it upon herself to help Rainbow study.
Okay, so how long has it been since we've heard about Rainbow Dash wanted to be a part of the Academy? Oh yeah, a fucking season ago. In the last episode, Rainbow Falls didn't help her out either after thoughtlessly villainizing Spitfire. Anyway, Dash is too active to take and acknowledge that Twilight tries to teach when she tries to help Dash prepare for the exam.
Okay, so the second Twilight brought Rainbow into the library, I was going, welcome, class clown, in the back of my mind. I know Twilight's enthusiastic about studying and knowledge, but she also knows Rainbow Dash. Don't you think it should have occurred to her that the energetic, active Rainbow Dash would have a little difficulty sitting still and studying? And the fact that she only gave each method one try without keeping at it and then just marks each of the methods off as a failure pissed me off. It reminded me a lot of public school systems in America, just mass cramming the education at you in one way and not bothering to actually help the kids who can't take in knowledge in that way. Maybe it's just a little personal for me since I was one of those kids who learned differently from others, but it's just sickening to me that different types of people, or ponies in this case, are kept to a single standard without individualism being taken into account.
I can understand the issues of educational systems, and this comes from someone who wasn't good at learning. Asperger's, ADD, and not to mention the fearful thought of those who would harass you. Needless to say, my public school counterpart of my childhood wasn't all that good. However, even though it's standard and bland, there is something that can't be denied, and it's that kids need to experience to learn and listen and provide attention. Kids are very energetic, which is why in kindergarten or elementary schools they have playgrounds. Still, kids are very active, even in their classrooms, and I can't blame them. But for the most part, they have to learn self-control. As much as I hated school as a kid, these are things that I have to say are more convenient for educational systems. So anyway, Dash gets so arrogant about Twilight's sense of knowledge that she dares to test herself. Twilight gives her a test, but Dash answers all the questions wrong. She then freaks out and then blames Twilight for this. Wow, I'm sorry to get on the episode's case here, but if we're supposed to have sympathy for Dash, this little blame game doesn't add much of her sensitivities. Yeah, she's frustrated and all, and she's got pride issues, but even when I was a kid, I didn't so-called blame others blatantly like that. I came up with excuses.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, Rainbow has a strong sense of pride. If she hadn't blamed Twilight, then she would have had to admit that Twilight was right and she really was in trouble when it came to knowing about the Wonderbolts. Do I think she was right to blame Twi? Hell no. However, I do understand why she did. Rainbow has a very hard time admitting when she's in trouble. Saying Twilight's teaching methods were lousy was not completely inaccurate either, given that those particular methods had no real effect on her. Granted, she wasn't taking it seriously, but book learning just isn't Rainbow's way to begin with. Luckily, Fluttershy pops in and stops the argument.
And thus the rest of the main six try their own teaching methods. Fluttershy puts on a play with her pets, and it doesn't work. Rarity holds a fashion show for the Wonderbolt uniforms, and it doesn't work. And then Pinkie does this. I'm sorry, but I didn't like this scene. It's supposedly a random parody of 90s rap, but that doesn't really add anything. I never liked rap to begin with, but that's not my reason for hating the song. Whenever Daniel Ingram provided music, they came out more naturally. Take Loves in Bloom, for instance, where it sounds like a generic mainstream pop song, which is a genre I wasn't too keen on either, but given how it's taken in for the story, that's why I loved it. A lot of people found this to be funny, but I honestly thought this was way too awkward for me to stomach in.
No. I don't care if this was a parody or homage or whatever. I'm sorry, but the shift to this song was too jarring and it didn't even fit. Besides, this has to be one of the weakest raps I've ever heard in my life. Pinkie, stick to your silly show tunes. Rapping ain't cute on you, hun.
Wow, and to think I was exaggerative. Son of a bitch! Sorry.
Oh, you just have a thing for mayors in uniform.
It's, a little personal to say. Dash gets overwhelmed with everyone's teaching methods, and then she takes off, doubting herself once more. Twilight decides to take a brief flight with her until Dash pushes her aside of an oncoming helicopter. Dash explains that one of her surroundings are her major strengths aside from flight speed, which gives Twilight an idea. And that's where my skepticism begins to fly throughout the rest of the episode. No pun intended.
I kinda have to agree with you. I can't say it surprises me that Twilight pulled together a sort of improvised play along their flight path, but even with cartoon speed, getting the entire town in on it would take more time than they had. Rainbow outright said they had 12 hours. It would take a lot longer than that to organize this silliness. Besides that, I do need to question whether or not they would be able to predict Rainbow's entire flight path like that. Twilight didn't say, let's fly to your house. She said, let's go flying. How in the name of fuck did everything just so happen to be perfectly aligned for Rainbow to pick up on a flight path that no one predicted? Nope, not gonna have one of my fits. I'm just gonna say that the whole play along the ground was a little too convenient for me to fully buy it.
I'm actually more skeptical on the moral itself. I'm not going to be the one to say that it was a bad message or anything, but I feel it's discouraging to viewers who would take it the wrong way. Granted, many people have different learning methods, and you'll eventually find out what it is. But at its worst, some kids would get the wrong ideas, like neglect school's teachings for the sake of their own way of their own learning curves, which can be done correctly after school, but I can't properly consider this a moral for everyone to agree on. It's a pretty big concern to me, while I have my own concerns to worry about in the process.
3 times now? You could at least ask a girl to dinner first.
I have an uncontrollable fetish on mare outfits. There, I said it.
Oh, Fox, you shouldn't have told me that.
I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confess.
Oh, hey, Fox. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm sorry, I was just having a little fun.
It's not you. I just can't control myself. And I especially find it disrespectful if I can't control myself towards other mares.
Hey, it's okay. We all have our thing. Truth be told, I have a bit of a thing for red stallions. I'm just lucky I don't have wings myself.
Let's just finish the review and get it over with. This episode has its heart in its right place, but I think it could have been framed and executed better. Some moments are questionable, some moments are awkward, and some scenes just feel a little too out of place. On the other hand, I can appreciate the topic it has, and it does what it can to explain how there are other teaching methods. It's also nice to see that we get to be back on track with Dash's prime motivation being a part of the Wonderbolts. In addition, we get some historical background about them instead of making them your typical military setup. At the very least, while some viewers may have loved it, I won't say it's bad. Nowhere near that close. But I stand differently from it. I mean, I even have guilty pleasure episodes like Bats and Spike at Your Service.
I'm sorry, what episode?
Bats?
I'm just gonna pretend I didn't hear that.
You hated Bats that much, huh?
No, I loved Bats, and I have no shame admitting that. Best Williams episode to date.
Oh, so it's Spike at Your Service then. Yeah, Spike at Your Service is a guilty pleasure. What are you doing with that mallet? Ellie?
Calmly expressing my dislike of that atrocity of an episode.
After watching Somepony to Watch Over Me, I wasn't sure on what to say about one of the new writers behind it being Scott Sonnenburn. What I didn't know was that he wrote for Celebrity Deathmatch, which was a very adult show back then, so that's a pretty dramatic step from him. But then again, Zack Snyder stepped away from writing adult comic book movies to a CGI cartoon about gorgeous-looking owls. That, and Dave Polsky used to write for South Park. In Scott's case, I guess he would want to take on a show for a younger audience, and while this first episode didn't impress me at all, that wouldn't excuse any other episodes in the future he would write. That all depends on the quality of the episodes he does write. So in this case, Tradia is another one of his episodes. We're taking place in Rainbow Falls where a festival is being held. The festival is a marathon of exchanging items to one another based on what they desire the most. In this case, we're given 3 different plot threads, separated with each other into a couple. Twilight and Pinkie Pie, Rarity and Applejack, and Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy. Twilight plans to trade some of her books away in order to save space in her library. At the same time, she's dealing with a number of ponies who are praising her for the princess title.
Hi, can I help you?
Dash plans to get her hooves on a first edition of a Daring Do book as she possesses a collection of her first editions of the series. Unfortunately, because the owner wants what Dash doesn't have, she's on an onslaught of training offers she has to complete in order to reach the book. This was very reminiscent of an episode in Ed, Edd and Eddy where Eddie was trying to go through various trading deals in order to get his hands on a set of eggs to trade with Rolf in order to make an omelet. Unlike that show, however, what Dash goes through, she eventually comes to make a deal that almost costed Fluttershy. In part of the deal, she was trading a 2-headed dog in which the show calls an Orthros. I hope I'm saying that correctly given I got brawled with comments on how I mispronounced the Chimera. Chimera! God damn it, how the fuck did I screw that up again? Anyway, because the owner doesn't know how to train it, she wanted to include Fluttershy to help out, which would take a while to train. Apparently Dash is very resentful of this afterwards and offers to trade back to get Fluttershy. On a similar topic, many have complained that Dash was given a Fluttershy on purpose to get the book, which was presenting her fangirl side going way too far. Hello, she wasn't paying full attention to the commitment. If she was really being this mean-spirited to her friend, she wouldn't have been this resentful in the first place. To be completely honest, I found this to be a better approach towards the testing of her loyalty, something in which Rainbow Falls did a poorly constructive job on. The fact that there are things that she wants and that there are things that she desires get the best out of her over her friends was a better demonstration instead of villainizing the crap out of someone. Sometimes we make bold decisions without properly speculating anything consequential. I could be looking into this too much though. Though if there was any problem that I had with the subplot, why the hell did Dash take a rusted horseshoe to trade in for something valuable in the first place? What kind of a value is that? It's like taking a beat up CD off the ground and trading it into a game store for a fresh, unopened copy of a special edition of Final Fantasy VI, the fucking Ben-Hur of the Super NES. Dash, you should have known what you were getting yourself into. That's one of the problems I had with this episode in general. Some of the characters were hit with an idiot stick again. In a further example, Twilight was about to trade all of her books for a broken quill that a little filly was carrying. I know that she wanted to get rid of her books to save room in her library, but for a broken quill? Seriously? I have to ask, what makes you think a broken quill would be worth of any value? That could have been dug out of a garbage can. Again, with another analogy, would I want to give up a Les Paul that was signed by Jimmy Page or Slash in exchange for something dug out of the trash? No! If the kid had a toy or an action figure, that would be more plausible and actually more adorable. Thankfully, Pinkie Pie steps in and pulls a flim and flam and making the crowd convinced and wanted to trade their items for Twilight's books. That's actually kind of nice of her. Though in the end, Twilight decides to keep them anyway, regardless of what her original intentions were. Controversially, there were complaints about the moral of Twilight's subplot and that there were items to get rid of and save in space, but there are those in value who are fond of your memories. Some like DigiBrony found this to be an issue because regardless of the nostalgic values, it's still a matter of taking up space since that's the issue to resolve. Admittedly, as much as I love the Super NES, I couldn't keep it forever, as well as many other consoles I used to own back in the day. But this moral doesn't bother me because there is a time where you want to hold on to your items just a little bit longer before the time comes to an end. This is pretty much the case for Twilight given the book she's owned, and it adds a sweet ending as the same Daring Do book that was used in Read and Weep is shared to Dash. As far as Rarity and Applejack's plot goes, there really isn't much going on with them other than being look before you sleep again. The two argue with each other about what items they want to trade in for and how ludicrous their items are in which they desire. Applejack wants a rusted pan as it's a way of cooking pies faster with the same quality. Rarity, on the other hand, wants a jewel design that's very identical to the one on her saddlebag. In short, they argue with each other, but in the end, they have a change of heart. The only thing I can say here is that the differences are to be respected. It is thoughtful to think for others in what they desire. Sadly, though, this is done too comedically, and the presentation is too reminiscent of Look Before You Sleep. Not that it's wrong, just nothing new added to the table here. With all these three subplots, the episode is a result of a mixed bag to the fandom. But nevertheless, I still enjoyed what the episode was offering. It's nothing great, there could have been a lot of tweaks to make the narrative better, but it could have been a lot worse. As it stands, it's pretty harmless at that. The voice work for the other ponies are a bit subpar, but it's only humor on Dash's subplot that makes up for it. I still get a good chuckle at the scene when Stellar Eclipse said no to Dash immediately about the trade offer.
Will you trade a lamp for my horseshoe so I can trade it for an Orthros and get my book?
No.
For a second episode by Scott, I hope to see more of him take a step further in the episodes and improve. This episode isn't up there, but I liked it a lot more than Somepony to watch over me. Until next time, I wish I could hold my Super NES and hug it all day. Wow. I mean, just wow. For once, DHX, you actually made a Spike episode where he's put to better use than treating him like a joke. For once, you're giving him something more meaningful other than tossing aside what he learned over and over again. For once, you made him an interesting character. Well, not that he was interesting before. He was great in Lesson 0 and all. But given how relegated he was to being a gag factory like Pinkie Pie this season, this is a big step up. I have to call cheers on that one. And all the credit goes to... What the fuck? Well, Corey. For once, you've actually put some effort into something. After mean-spiritedly placing Spike in a stage of karma and making the episode seem pointless, and also cheaply and forcefully villainizing the Wonderbolts as if you're implying they aren't something Dash wanted to be with, I'm not sure if I can trust you just yet. Surely this is something you couldn't do yourself. Ah, of course. Megan McCarthy. Although I wasn't fond of Sombra, nor was I a fan of Hearts and Tuesday, she still has quite a good resume of episodes she's written. Party of One, Sweet and Elite, Princess Twilight Sparkle, and one of my personal favorites being Lesson Zero. Nonetheless, I'm still surprised at how this episode turned out, given that this was a collaborative episode, when there were Notorious ones. Now, I don't dwell on episodes like Power Ponies and Putting Your Hoof Down, given that they're collab efforts. In fact, I didn't have as much of a big issue with them. Putting that aside, I really like this episode. I like that Spike was put in a better position in contrast of making him a running gag factory. And in doing so, he's confronted with one of his closest friends, Rarity. This episode starts off as Rarity is preparing a new stage design for a puppeteer, who looks to be like Snip's dad, but I won't jump to any conclusions. And in short, he brutally turns down the project and storms off, leaving Rarity completely upset with herself.
Oh, forget it, Spike. I'd never have something finished in time.
Concerned, Spike heads to the castle of the two sisters to find a book that would help out Rarity's feelings. Obliviously, he runs into a hidden book entitled The Inspiration Manifestation, hence the title of the episode. And by the looks of it, I swear that has to be the Equestria Necronomicon. I had to give the writers credit here for referencing Evil Dead on a show for kids. That's pretty ballsy. Anyway, Spike takes it and hands it to Rarity. Upon reading it, the magic book then takes over her. With the spell of the book, she develops an endless passion of creativity to the point where she dominates Ponyville with her creative spells. So what follows here is another trend of madness of a character from the main six like I've seen in Party of One and Lesson Zero. I definitely love this vibe of insanity. As I may recall throughout Season 4, I didn't like it when the characters were coming off unlikable, such as when I ranted about Pinkie Pie and Filli Vanilli, which I will admit I did get too carried away. But a character that was insane never bothers me because it all narrows down to their conflict. It can be received as mean-spirited, but for the most part, Megan managed to play her cards right, as the insanity is not only comedic, but also sympathetic, as the lead to the insanity was more relatable to the audience. Take these two episodes as well as The Best Night Ever, and hopefully you understand my viewpoint. Differently, however, the real sympathetic spotlight goes to Spike. In his regard, Spike wanted to help out Rarity through hard times and make her happy. But the consequences of what he offered here are so out of control that he has to stop her. Unfortunately, his fear is that it would cost him his friendship with Rarity, which adds more weight to his conflict considering how admirable he was with her in Season 1. This to me was a better approach for Spike instead of constantly having him base his self-worth over and over again. He's dealing with someone he's closely connected with, and he's in fear of losing her. Rarity is well presented in this episode as well as the book that takes over her. Even though her insanity doesn't level up with Twilight or Pinkie Pie, she still comes off as intimidating. In fact, with her creativity taken over, it's been pretty hazardous to the folks in Ponyville. Observationally, this could be a relatable social commentary for those who range from passionate about creativity to just downright obsessive. Obsession is a very unhealthy mentality that can change you for the worse depending on the situation. For instance, you want to take piano lessons and you strive for that skill. But then there's that breaking point where you decide to skip work, skip lunch or dinner, sleep, and social interactions, and other goals in life. I'm looking too deeply into this. But in short, I can relate to Rarity's uncontrollable behavior. Now technically she has no memory of the events at the end of the episode, but it still takes Rarity's part into consideration. Outside of it though, the pacing feels incredibly slow. Most of the episode involves Rarity exerting herself with increased abilities, and that's about it. Comparatively, Twilight was trying to find a lesson to write in Lesson 0 as tension was building, and Pinkie was trying to figure out the absence of her friends since they weren't attending to her after party. Both of these kept these episodes well paced and the viewer interested. With Rarity and Inspiration Manifestation, Rarity was taken from the book and her creation got out of control early on in the episode, and most of her time is just her could be completely out of control. On the bright side, Spike's conflict carried me through. Also, I may not be the only one here, but I am tired of the owl joke. It wasn't funny in Owl's World That Ends Well, it wasn't funny in Just for Sidekicks, and it still isn't funny now. Spike? He's an owl. Owls hoot. Are you seriously this incompetent? Why doesn't Twilight just clarify that with him? I know it's nitpicking, but Spike's not an idiot. He's oblivious at times, but that's a part of the charm of his character. But he's at least supportive to her, or at least on some occasions. But does that stop me from what this episode offers? No. I still really like this episode a lot. It still has that insane wit from Megan McCarthy's other works. It adds a bit of a conflict to Spike and the questions of his connections to who he admires the most. It's a character progression that I like to see instead of the same old same old. There also aren't any 180s pulled, nor did I see anything malicious get in the way of being entertaining like it did with Just for Psychics or Rainbow Falls. Corey, I give you points for that one. I at least hope it doesn't continue that way, but I'm not sure if I can trust you still. But until then, I'll catch you all on, the Equestrian Games! Awesome! We're coming close to the end of the season already before I knew it. Okay, this should be no problem watching this episode. What was that? What the fuck was that? So let me get this straight. You had Just for Sidekicks, Games Ponies Play, Flight to the Finish, and Rainbow Falls with all the ads that talk about the Equestrian Games, all amounting to another Spike episode?
On the overreaction train.
Fuck! What was the point? What was the goddamn point? All the buildup, all the advertising, and all the tension of this so-called arc since season 3, you centered on Spike. Who the fuck thought that this was a bright idea? I'm not even disappointed here. I feel cheated. Needless to say, upon watching this episode, I was very pissed off. The fact that you had multiple episodes to what we thought was going to be a big episode of what it was going to be about resulted in something completely irrelevant. This is by no surprise that caused such an uproar in the fandom. I mean, imagine walking into a diner and you're convinced by the waiter to pick an order of what looks like a juicy steak dinner. So you make the order, you wait roughly an hour, which would obviously make any customer impatient. And in the end, your dish turns out to be a puny tuna sandwich. Really? This is all I got? This is what I paid for? The point is, this is what happens when you add too much build-up. Especially starting this arc from the remains of Season 3, you should have been aware of the repercussions ahead of time, DHX. What were you thinking? Why did this exist? What was the point? I demand an answer to this. Until then, the only thing I can do is judge the episode accountable for what it is, because dwelling on an episode of what it isn't won't do any justice except be a rant and a review. So yeah, it's another Spike episode, but not only that, we got another episode about his confidence regained just like with Power Ponies and Owl's Well that ends well. Did the staff not learn their lesson here? Could this episode be any worse? The short answer? No. In fact, this episode did a better job than all the other episodes that had the same plot. Much better than I originally gave it credit for when I posted my feelings on DeviantArt. Apparently a lot of people found this to be the best Spike episode, but yeah, I'm sticking with the inspiration manifestation for his arc progression than the same repetition. But I'm getting too ahead of myself here. The Equestria Games begins with a scene before the opening as we're all given the contestants getting ready for the big event. Yeah, don't let that fool you, that's not really the main focus here. At the arrival of the Crystal Empire, Spike is taken to the castle and he is practically worshipped like a god for saving the Empire. In addition, he's elected to do the honors of lighting the stadium torch. Unfortunately, because of his unexpected stage fright, he has trouble breathing fire to light up the torch, so Twilight insists with her magic while she's in the crowd. Spike, however, is unsure of what happened.
I was afraid you'd be upset.
Upset? Are you kidding? Why would I be upset to discover I can light fire with my mind?
That was stupid. How did you come to that conclusion? This led me to believe that the episode had the having an ability to do something when in actuality you don't plot. It's like Somepony to watch over me again when the plot was indecisive of whether or not it was about self-independence. Note to the staff, can you please stay on topic on what the episode is about? Make up your mind. Twilight thankfully tells Spike the truth, but it apparently impacts him negatively. This could have been fine without the whole lighting fire telekinesis joke that appeared completely left field and still have the same impact. So he tries to make up for the loss by singing for the anthem of what he thought was the Crystal Empire, when it was actually the Cloudsdale anthem because they were the winners. This leads me to my second issue. This scene made me cringe so bad I still fast forward the scene. In case it wasn't obvious, I hate it when a character goes to embarrass themselves when they know what's coming to them. It's like that scene in Finding Nemo when Dory was trying to communicate with the whales. It wasn't funny, it wasn't cute, it was annoying. Many have argued that this was supposed to be a cringeworthy experience in order for us to have feelings for Spike. In that case, don't you think it's a little mean-spirited that no one steps in to offer support for the almighty Spike? Even more so, it went on for too long. Now thankfully, these are the only two major complaints that I have. So because of that performance, Spike feels even more impacted than ever before. Twilight, however, gets Spike to continue to be at the games as the final round is an Ice Arch tournament. Accidentally, one of the members shoots an arrow in the sky and turns a huge cloud into a ball of ice, becoming a huge hazard as it falls down the stadium. With Spike in hand, he makes his entrance and burns out the ice cloud with his fire breath, becoming one of the most epic moments I've seen. The episode ends with a rather well-told moral about how you can be your own worst critic, but letting go of your past mistakes and listening to others that praise you and what you've done can make you feel better. Everyone has their own feelings on what they feel they've accomplished, but those around you who tell you and what you've done for the better allows having an open mind. This alone makes up for the problems I had with the two embarrassing scenes, because these scenes demonstrated how Spike's intentions can get the best out of him. In his other episodes, he moaned and complained about himself, but here, he tries his best and feels the impacts on his failures. That to me is a better approach when displaying a confidence regained formula. I just feel they could have been done better, and it's a real pity it was used here with all the hype of the games behind it, which clouded a majority of us with frustration, including myself. I still feel ripped by all the build-up and cheated by the final results, but as a Spike episode on its own, it does well enough to earn a good reputation for those who like it otherwise. That being said, let there be a lesson to DHX when it comes to making an arc. Never, ever, ever make an arc like this again. Be aware of what the viewers are thinking. Not following what they want, but at least be aware. With all that said, does this arc affect the rest of the season? No. Because this wasn't the main arc, and the episode wasn't the finale. That's the only thing left to talk about now. How will this conclude the season? What's the final result? Until then, stay tuned as I conclude the season. And I don't want to talk about this episode ever again. Season 4. I underestimated you. Let there be a reason as to why I take this show seriously. Over my experience in my reviewing criteria, I had the unfortunate realization about Hollywood industries. Coming from a citizen of Southern California, even though there are movies nowadays worth seeing, even though there's excitement of what movies in production may behold, Hollywood doesn't care about quality entertainment. They only care about money. It explains a lot when Disney no longer attempts to make another traditionally animated feature. Even though they tried, the outcome is more depressing. It explains a lot when another remake is in the works. Because God forbid Hollywood comes up with an original concept. It explains a lot when we get another entry of Resident Evil, Michael Bay's Transformers, and of course, another entry of the disgusting, high-pitched vocalist rodents who do nothing more than wave keys in front of their children and profiting so high over movies that have more effort put into them. It's sickening. And what's even worse, not one coworker in the industry will listen to the critics. So why waste my breath? When it came to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, I was impressed with what was shown.
I felt it the very moment I realized how happy I was to hear you, to see you, how much I cared about you. The spark ignited inside me when I realized that you all are my friends.
It was a silly yet very atmospheric and lighthearted show with terrifically well-presented social lessons to younger audiences that can appeal to an older demographic. Never in my life did I think I would be entertained with something that would originally please young girls. With newer audiences gating and with our hype that leads to neutral viewers, however, that is why I take the show seriously. God forbid our impression leaves a wrong impression to their other viewers. To this day, it's still a great show to watch, and Twilight's Kingdom is large proof of that, for it's an end to a season with many events that have occurred. Even though the finale has somewhat questionable moments, it doesn't take away the importance of what the show is about. Megan McCarthy played her cards right for the arc. It's a dramatic, action-packed two-parter on the surface, but to its core, it brought out a very satisfying, deep finale about obstacles to overcome, ranging from tyranny, what purposes to find in your life, trust and betrayal, delicate choices, and changes that are rather tragic, but are set up for better outcomes. There's a lot going on in this finale, as it is tied to many loose ends. Even though it wasn't perfect, it doesn't take away the purpose of what was shown and delivered. We open up with Twilight laying down the tapestry of a nation of the few rulers who arrive at the Crystal Empire. Twilight is unsure afterwards of what her purpose serves for a princess.
Well, it's just that Princess Luna raises the moon, Princess Celestia raises the sun, you protect the Crystal Empire, and all I seem to do is smile and wave.
This, right off the bat, leads to the viewers in the same question about her place in Magical Mystery Cure, and thus the question is now talked about in the show. Sometimes you have to be patient in order to find your place. The episode stops at nothing to lay it down as we're given a musical. All the princesses have their singing lines along with. The only complaint that I have with the song is that visually there's a copy and paste of the princess cutie marks being recycled. But nonetheless, I found the song to be amusing and adding to its topic on Twilight's role. It isn't long, however, before we're introduced to our next villain, Tyrek, a character who was once from a Generation 1 episode, Rescue at Midnight Castle. It was a pilot episode that initiated the TV lineup of the My Little Pony franchise entirely. Told through a storybook like the pilot intro, Tyrek's brother Scorpan betrayed and turned in Tyrek when attempting to steal the magic in Equestria, and was sent to Tartarus for over 1,000 years. Within recent time, however, he's become strong enough to walk on the boundaries of Equestria. In his motivation, he consumes and absorbs magic and grows more powerful from any of the ponies from Unicorn to Earth to Pegasi and take over Equestria. This villain is one of the most convincing I've seen on screen, and even more so, he plans ahead of his outcomes of what he knows of. Did I mention this was written by Megan McCarthy? From this point on, that based on what villains I've seen recently, I don't think Megan McCarthy can write villains very well. Megan, you are full of surprises. I know about what I said about Sombra, but I think I found a new favorite villain here. Tyrek is threatening, he shows it, he steps his boundaries of what can get in his way, and he would change things for the worst in civilization. This was a villain who enjoyed being a villain, and not just for the sake of it. This was what I asked for in the entire show. In addition, Tyrek is manipulative, which leads me to the other character involved, Discord.
I'm afraid I must call in another to stop Tyrek. Discord.
At first I thought this was completely random for the Alicorns to rely on, but I can't forget something that Celestia said in the past.
But I have use for Discord's magic if it can be reformed to serve good instead of evil.
Just a food for thought. Sadly, Discord is manipulated by Tyrek and matters have gotten worse. Going over the box, I'll first be honest and say that I wasn't very fond that the symbolic rainbow epiphanies were the keys because I'm not a fan of using symbolism or subtlety as a main plot device. That also explains why I don't like Sombra. I assumed that it was the only ongoing arc. What I didn't realize was what else the arc carried with, and how it was supported for the obvious subtitle of the show, that being the journal. It wasn't just an entry of ongoing lessons the show carried, it was set up to remind them that they faced the most difficult challenges based on their elements of harmony.
All of you had tough choices to make, but when you made the right one and embraced your element, it helped some pony else make the right choice too. Each of you received something from the pony whose life you helped change. I know it sounds crazy, but maybe there's something special about those objects that could lead us to the location of the keys.
Some would consider it predictable, but while I didn't like the symbolism being put to use, it still worked because it was more or less about the importance of their character traits, as it was them being put to the ultimate test as a stepping stone for character development. However, there's only one key left, and that predictability is saved for the later half. If there's anything I had a problem with, Celestia and the rest of the Alicorns handed all of their magic to Twilight so that Tyrek wouldn't get his hands on it. While I can understand you want to keep it to someone else for safekeepings, they forgot that Discord was with Tyrek, and he knows about Twilight and where she lives. Furthermore, you should have broken the stained glass window of Twilight's portrait, and because of this, that's how Twilight was found, as Celestia, Luna, and Cadence were all sent to Tartarus. And what's worse, not only was Twilight found, her friends have been captured, and her library is now destroyed. Reminded of Tradia when she decided to keep her books for fond memories we witnessed in the show, words cannot describe how impacting it is when her home is blasted away and everything she once owned in that home is now gone. That tree was an icon of the show from the very beginning, and to see this happen is a very bold stunt of DHX to pull. With rage, Twilight fights back and we're given a rather surprisingly entertaining fight scene for a good minute and a half. Let's just hope the show doesn't become Dragon Ball Z later on, because the show is not about action, it's about characters and relations. Alas, however, it is of no use. Coming to an impasse, Tyrek uses Twilight's friends in exchange for the Alicorn magic. Though the commitment is tough since it's the cost of what remains important for Equestria, that makes the point. Twilight stumbles upon her toughest challenge, and thus it brings forth the last and final epiphany of the box, her element of magic. Upon watching the interactions between Discord and Tyrek, it's pretty clear on what Discord was drawn into. He was doing his duty until Tyrek manipulated him to join forces. Throughout his finale, Discord helped out Tyrek, and was even rewarded a sign of gratitude and loyalty, Scorpan's medallion. But alas, Discord gets double-crossed.
You've helped me grow strong. You've provided the means by which I can obtain Princess Twilight's magic. And now you are no longer of any use to me.
This leads me to something I was fascinated from. Throughout the season, especially according to Three's a Crowd, Twilight wasn't fond of Discord regardless of his reformation. This was unexpectedly an arc that was saved until the finale. On Discord's behalf, he continued making his mistake by betraying everyone until his underestimation of Tyrek was drawn back to him.
Surely you saw this coming.
I didn't. I truly didn't.
His arrogance that blinded him left him in regret and sorrow.
We aren't worth it!
Oh, but you are, Fluttershy. You're the pony who taught me that friendship is magic. I had magic and friendship, and now I don't have either.
Losing everything you can admire can be devastating, and now Discord is laid down to that position. But to top off his character, he handed the medallion to Twilight, becoming the final key item.
Tyrek tricked me into believing that he could offer me something more valuable than friendship. but there is nothing worth more. I see that now. He lied when he said that this medallion was given as a sign of gratitude and loyalty. But when I say that it is a sign of our true friendship, I am telling the truth.
So, recapping this, you've got a character who's had separate ways with Twilight because of his notorious antics, which later got back to him after betraying his friends, and was given something which he thought he meant more of, and was instead handed to Twilight, which not just brought back that meaning, but also a new and final key to the chest, which placed more weight on the chemistry of these two characters. That's a lot to be put into for the season, Megan. Major respect for that unexpected plot point. With the final key, the chest is finally opened, and a new source of power is given from the Tree of Harmony. Their rainbow power. Not very fond of the designs, but then again, it's a show based on selling toys, so no use complaining about that here. But with their newfound abilities, Tyrek is defeated, the magic of all ponies are given back, and peace is restored. A new home, a castle, is given to Twilight. But the real ending note for me is something drawn back to the importance of the show.
As princess, I believe I have the power to spread the magic of friendship across Equestria. That is the role I am meant to have in our world. The role I choose to have. But I didn't defeat Tyrek on my own. It took all of us to unlock the chest.
Most medias have a tendency of having one character be the hero and center the world around that character. It's a done-to-death phenomenon that still continues today and strikes the egos of those around us who grow up with the setup. Not this show. It's not just about Twilight. It's about everyone else and their importance, and it's pretty obvious, especially since this through social did not include Twilight to begin with. It's a show about relations and characters who take the importance in the show and what they all learn from. Season 4 was another stepping stone for all of them, and with the events that happened, the end of one chapter comes a new beginning. Season 4 was a lot better than I thought it was. It brought a lot of memories of who I was with from my review in progress. They become unforgettable experiences for me that will hopefully lead for the better. I can remember like it was yesterday when I first started. I never thought that time would pass by this quickly, but looking back, they have something for me to truly appreciate. Admittedly, a lot of us have been dysfunctional, and even worse, we were given a rather bad reputation of the fandom. This was not meant to happen. But that's what happens when things aren't thought out completely. We've had controversial moments, we faced hard times, but we are to understand each other, and we have. We may have made mistakes, but that's what makes us grow stronger. That's what makes anyone grow stronger. There's always a challenge to face and mistakes to admit to, and you're never going to get any better unless you learn to face them. I won't deny it. I've been harsh on Season 4. I blinded myself with what I assumed it was before waiting for the rest of the season. That was a mistake I should learn from. I can't be absolute, but rest assured, whether expressively, comedically, artistically, or what have you, I do what I can to encourage improvement, not make the creators look bad. And you know what? I think they have improved. This isn't about what we want. It's not about what we expect. It's about what we can address for the better. We may have been dysfunctional, but in the end, reviewers, analysts, and even you viewers in what you have provided, we stand together. But the one question still remains. Can we last another season? The short answer, we don't know. However, there's no doubt we'll find out. Until then, I'm GoldenFox, and I will catch you all on Season 5.